Chapter 1596. Xue Xue originally came to see Xiao Hua, but when she saw Zhuo Minghui, she immediately started chatting with Zhuo Minghui. Zhuo Minghui also felt that Xue Xue was more and more pleasing to the eye. She was very happy and left Xiao Hua to the side. After a while, there was a slight commotion in front of them. Xiao Hua looked up and saw several cultivators standing on the platform. The one in front was Zhen Qing, a golden core cultivator from Zhenlei Palace. Beside him was a foundation establishment cultivator in the late stage. He had a beard on his face and looked very rude. The foundation establishment cultivator's voice was very loud and clear. He said, "Are all the disciples from the various lightning palaces here?" The Spring Thunder Hall was silent and no one answered. Xiao Hua laughed secretly. He didn't know how that person would answer if there were still people who didn't come. "Since all the disciples are here, we will set off immediately. I am Zhen Yu from Zhenlei Palace. I am the deputy envoy of the Tai Ching sect in Meng Nation to participate in the Feather Immortal Conference. In order to ensure the safety of the disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Conference, Marshal Uncle Zhen Qing from Zhenlei Palace will be the envoy personally. Therefore, you don't have to worry about the safety of the disciples." After Zhen Yu finished speaking, he turned his head and seemed to ask Zhen Qing. Zhen Qing shook his head slightly and waved his hand. Lightning flashed and a pitch-black magic weapon flew out of the hall. "Disciples, let's board the boat outside the hall." Zhen Yu shouted loudly and bowed to let Zhen Qing go first. Zhen Qing nodded slightly and stepped down from the platform. He cupped his hands at the disciples below and walked out of the Spring Thunder Hall. Then, the disciples of Chengquan Lightning Palace followed him out. Everyone moved. At this moment, Xue Xue walked in front of Xiao Hua and whispered, "Xiao Hua, you have to be careful." Xiao Hua smiled and nodded. "Don't worry. I think your senior sister has already told you how I passed. I will just take this trip as an eye-opener. Nothing will happen to me if I don't stand out." "How did you pass? Could it be that there is something strange?" Xue Xue was slightly curious, but she didn't pursue the matter. She stretched out her hand and removed the storage pouch from her waist before passing it over, and then she said with slight embarrassment, "The things within the storage pouch aren't much, but they were made by the talisman crafting disciples of my Thunderstorm Palace. Master gave them to me, so take them and use them today." Xiao Hua took the storage pouch and opened it to take a look. Apart from a few spirit stones, there were also medicinal pills and talismans. Naturally, there were also a lot of fireball talismans. Xue Xue continued softly, "I don't know what kind of talisman you used, but seeing that you're here, the fireball charms used in the valley are very handy, so I took a few more." "Ah, very good, very good." Xiao Hua didn't hold back. He waved his hand and took away all the items in the storage pouch. Xue Xue was happy when she saw that Xiao Hua didn't treat her as an outsider. She took the storage pouch and said happily, "I hope that you and my senior sister will be able to perform well in the Feather Immortal Gathering." Sun Shu smiled faintly and followed the crowd out of the Spring Thunder Hall. Behind them, Yuan Bo and Min Gu didn't look very good. Wang Yunxiao looked at the two of them meaningfully. Outside the Spring Thunder Hall, a small lightning boat was parked on the empty ground. The pitch-black boat had faint purple lightning and sparks flashing on it. Zhen Qing was already standing at the bow of the boat with her hands behind her back. "All right, Xiao Hua, you can go up now. Be careful." She stopped helplessly and said in a low voice, "The Feather Immortal Gathering is a good opportunity to make a name for yourself, but there are also certain risks. If you really want to focus on cultivation, you can just go and take a look." Xiao Hua smiled when he saw that his master had finally relented. "Thank you for your understanding, master." She glared at him helplessly and said, "I'm not done yet. If there's a chance, why don't you show them a few moves and let them see the power of our myriad Thunder Valley?" "I understand," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "You have to rely on yourself outside. Be careful. If there's anything wrong, follow your grandmaster closely." Zhuo Minghui also reminded him. Xiao Hua looked at his master's wife, who was treating him like a child, and said with a smile, "I understand." Then he looked at Xue Xue and nodded slightly. He turned to Sun Shu and said with a smile, "Senior Sun, let's go." Sun Shu nodded and flew up the lightning boat with Xiao Hua. The two of them stood at the edge of the lightning boat and waved at Helplessness and the others. When all the disciples boarded the lightning boat, Zhen Qing waved her hand and cast a spell on the formation plate of the lightning boat. The lightning boat buzzed and immediately flew into the sky and flew away at an extremely fast speed. When the lightning boat disappeared, Zhuo Minghui smiled and said to Xue Xue in front of the Spring Thunder Hall, "Xue Xue, if you're free after cultivating, can you come to the Myriad Thunder Valley for a chat?" Shui Shui's face was slightly red. She bowed and said, I still have to tell Master. If Master agrees, I'll definitely go. I will take my leave first. After Shui Shui flew away, Helplessness and Zhuo Minghui also flew to the myriad Thunder Valley. In the sky, Helplessness sighed. Xiaohua, this brat. Instead of cultivating properly, he's actually thinking about dual cultivation? However, this Shui Shui is really not bad. And then Sun Shu is also good. Zhuo Minghui said with a smile. Do. Helplessness curled her lips and said, Can Xiaohua handle it? Is he still cultivating? Putting aside Helplessness and Zhuo Minghui worrying about Xiaohua's cultivation, on the lightning boat, Xiaohua was originally standing together with Sun Shu. However, when the surrounding people were sitting cross-legged, cultivating or whispering, the two of them became awkward. Sun Shu looked at the disciples of distant Thunder Palace in the distance and said, I will go over there and see junior sister. Senior sister Sun, please? Xiaohua quickly said, Disciple also needs to cultivate. After Sun Shu left, Xiaohua immediately sat down and took out a soul-gathering pill from his storage bag. He ate it and closed his eyes to cultivate. The lightning boat was extremely fast, but Meng country was indeed far away. For more than 10 days the lightning boat didn't stop at all, but they still didn't reach Meng country. During this time, Xiaohua ignored everyone and only hid in a corner of the lightning boat to cultivate. Wang Yunxiao and the other two looked at Xiaohua's appearance and also extinguished the thought of catching up with him. Instead, they found an opportunity to sit together with the disciples of distant Thunder Palace and converted Thunder Palace. Looking at the 10 disciples of Heavenly Thunder Palace and Earth Thunder Palace, they seemed to have a feeling of superiority. They only talked to these 2 disciples of Heavenly Thunder Palace and ignored the others who went to talk to them. After a long time, no one went to eat soft rebuffs. The lightning boat was controlled by Zhen Qing and Zhen Yu. The 2 of them took turns to rest and didn't interfere much with the movements of the 20 disciples. However, when they occasionally saw the indifference and arrogance of the disciples of Heavenly Thunder Palace, Zhen Qing slightly frowned. Of course, Zhen Qing also paid attention to Xiaohua. After all, Xiaohua was the only one who closed his eyes and cultivated the moment he boarded the thunder ship. He didn't talk to anyone at all. Furthermore, he had met Xiaohua during the disciple selection. He was also the one who gave Xiaohua the concealed flame physique. Therefore, when he saw Xiaohua reach the early stage of the 12th layer of the qi refining realm in just a few years, Zhen Qing couldn't help but nod her head slightly. On this day, it was a dreary and misty day. Raindrops fell from the sky and hit the lightning boat. The lightning boat originally had a defensive brilliance, but Zhen Qing seemed to like this weather. He actually removed the defensive formation, allowing the raindrops to hit his body. A strong wind blew everyone's clothes and long hair. Woo, the sound of a flute sobbed. Sitting upright on the lightning boat, Zhen Qing started to play his flute. Xiaohua was cultivating when he suddenly heard the mournful sound of the flute. The true qi flowing in his meridians became sluggish at first, then it actually started to flow with the flute sound. Xiaohua felt as if he was at the lakeside of a drizzling lake. The mirror-like surface of the lake was disrupted by the raindrops. Countless black dots formed on the surface of the lake, making a pitter-patter-patter sound. That sound was like a chaotic state of mind, unable to calm down. There was a faint mist by the lakeside. Xiaohua felt that there seemed to be a person he was worried about in the mist. However, the mournful voice separated him from that person. He couldn't see her clearly, nor could he touch her. Xiaohua's heart was filled with grief. He tried his best to rush into the mist, wanting to see what was going on. However, the more hurried he was, the more confused he became. He walked through the grass by the lakeside and walked through the forest by the lakeside. All along, he could only see a corner of a pure white dress fluttering in front of his eyes. At this moment, the sound of the flute suddenly became louder. It was like a strong ray of sunlight, piercing through the mist. The pure white dress suddenly flashed, and the graceful figure suddenly turned around. What entered Xiaohua's eyes was a beautiful face. That face seemed unfamiliar yet familiar. Only the beauty mole on the left side of the chin was particularly eye-catching. Dream? Xiaohua couldn't help but groan. Fairy Hong Xia? With this call, Xiaohua suddenly woke up. He didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest and hurriedly entered the space. It was very easy for him to comprehend the heavenly Tao. He no longer paid attention to Zhen Qing's disturbing flute sound. However, Xiaohua, who had always been emotionless during cultivation, had a drop of sparkling and translucent tears seeping out from the corner of his eye. Xiaohua sank into cultivation. After an unknown period of time, his entire body suddenly trembled violently, and he was jolted awake from his cultivation. "Io, what's going on?" Xiaohua opened his eyes and saw that it was actually chaos. The entire thunder ship was shaking violently. Everyone on the thunder ship couldn't stand steadily and was floating in the air. As for Zhen Qing, she had already put away her flute somewhere. She flew out of the thunder ship and released her divine sense to observe carefully. Xiaohua frowned. He didn't fly up in a hurry. Instead, the true qi in his body moved slightly. His entire body was nailed to the thunder ship in a very strange manner. Why are there tears at the corner of my eyes? Xiaohua felt that something was wrong with his face. He used his hand to wipe away the tears. At this moment he heard Zhen Qing's somewhat nervous voice. "Zhenyu, control the thunder ship first. I will go down and take a look." "Yes, disciple obeys," Zhenyu replied. Just as he was about to control the thunder ship, a spirit beast that looked very similar to a leopard suddenly flew out from the pitch-black clouds below the thunder ship. It crashed into the bottom of the thunder ship, causing the thunder ship to almost capsize. The people on the thunder ship were also swaying left and right. Chapter 1597. Flying Leopard. Evil Creature. When Zhen Qing, who was flying in the air, saw that the spirit beast had actually escaped from her spiritual sense attack, she couldn't help but become furious. She slapped her storage pouch and a 5-colored object flew into the air. It was Zhen Qing's favorite magic tool, Serenity Seeker. This, Serenity Seeker, was different from ordinary magic tools. It looked like a flute. When it flew into the air, a cold whimper sound was emitted from the Serenity Seeker. A sound attack magic tool? Xiaohua's figure stood steadily on the tilted thunder boat. He had already released his Buddhist awareness and saw the situation outside the thunder boat clearly. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. However, when he thought about how Zhen Qing was proficient in music, this kind of formless sound attack magic tool was definitely Zhen Qing's best choice. When Zhen Qing used it, it would definitely have boundless power. Sure enough, when the Serenity Seeker flew into the air, it emitted a faint brilliance. When Zhen Qing's magic power was activated, the brilliance seemed to follow a kind of rhythm. It would expand and shrink from time to time. Moreover, it was sometimes fast and sometimes slow. The flying leopard that knocked the thunder boat askew was currently leaping into the air vigorously. On its bronze-colored body, its short fur was standing upright like steel. The spirit beast's 4 hooves were suspended in the air. On its forelimbs, there were 2 wings that looked like feathers yet were not feathers. They were also flesh yet not flesh. The edges of the wings were connected to its body by a thin layer of flesh. The flying leopard's eyes were glowing green and faintly flashing with brilliance. The sound of the Serenity Seeker spread out invisibly. In the beginning, the flying leopard didn't hear it. It opened its sharp teeth and swayed its head left and right. However, as Zhen Qing's magic power was activated, the sound wave became even denser. It was like a silk net that wrapped around the flying leopard. At this moment, the flying leopard that was accumulating power finally sensed the danger. Wow! The flying leopard raised its head and roared. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was sucked into it. Rays of faint brilliance appeared from the top of the flying leopard's head and flowed to its tail like water. At the same time, the flying leopard's 2 wings violently flapped as if it was trying its best to break free from the restraint of the sound wave. However, the winged leopard's limbs were twitching and its body was twisting rapidly. Zhen Qing's magic item was still very powerful. The winged leopard was slowly being restrained by the sound waves. At this moment, the thunder ship had already stabilized under Zhen Yu's control. Everyone landed on the thunder ship in shock. Seeing that the flying leopard beast was captured, Xiaohua and the others heaved a sigh of relief. There were even a few disciples who were eager to rush out of the thunder ship to help Zhen Qing. However, without Zhen Qing's permission, Zhen Yu didn't dare to approach the thunder boat. He could only stop the thunder boat from afar. The flying leopard beast struggled even harder, but its movements were getting softer and softer. The chaotic heaven-earth spiritual qi in the surroundings was also gradually calming down. In just a short while, Zhen Qing would be able to completely subdue the flying leopard beast. However, just as everyone thought that victory was in their hands, the flying leopard beast stopped struggling. It raised its head with great difficulty and opened its mouth, revealing its fangs. There was a faint earthy yellow glow in its mouth. Once this glow appeared, the heaven-earth spiritual qi that had just calmed down became chaotic again. It was all rapidly sucked into the flying leopard beast's mouth. Roar! With a deafening roar, the flying leopard beast's body once again emitted a glow. This time, every time the glow flowed through the flying leopard beast's body, the flying leopard beast's body grew larger. This is bad. Seeing this, Zhenqing was shocked. At the same time she activated her magic power, she clenched her teeth and quickly moved her fingers. When Netherworld Seeking released the soundless wave, it let out another sound. The sound was very unpleasant to hear. It was like two pieces of wood hitting each other or rocks hitting each other. The flying leopard beast shook its head and wagged its tail. Its eyes revealed an extremely painful expression. Seeing that the sound wave was effective, Zhenqing moved her fingers again. She wanted to completely defeat the flying leopard beast. Unfortunately, in the span of a few breaths, the winged leopard's body had expanded by more than 30%. Following another strong flash of light from the winged leopard, a series of crackling sounds rang in their minds. The soundless wave that trapped the winged leopard with Serenity Seeker had exploded. With a piu sound, a mouthful of blood spurted out from Zhenqing's mouth. She seemed to have been injured because her mystic instrument's attack had been broken. Seeing that it was free, the flying leopard beast let out another roar. It spread its wings and charged towards Zhenqing like a shadow. Zhenqing was caught off guard. She quickly dodged and pointed her finger. Serenity Seeking drew an arc in front of her. Zhenqing barely dodged the flying leopard beast. However, the flying leopard beast's tail swung in midair and unexpectedly hit Zhenqing's waist. The tail swung through the spiritual energy in the air and made a sob sound. Needless to say, the strength of the tail was definitely impressive. If Zhenqing was hit, it was hard to say what would happen. Flying and speed were definitely not Zhenqing's strong points. Just dodging the flying leopard beast's attack was already difficult enough. The flying leopard beast's attack put Zhenqing in a difficult position. Sigh. Zhenqing sighed. In a hurry, she pointed her finger at Serenity Seeking again. The magic weapon descended a few feet and blocked the flying leopard beast's tail. At the same time, Zhenqing hurriedly circulated her magic power and wanted to increase the glow of the protection. The flying leopard beast's tail seemed to have eyes. When it swung its tail in front of Serenity Seeking, it actually swept past the bottom of Serenity Seeking and hit Zhenqing's waist. With a loud "pa" sound, Zhenqing's body was sent flying by the flying leopard beast's tail. At the same time, the glow at his waist flickered rapidly and flickered a few times. His defense was also about to be destroyed. Good heavens, this is an Aurus Core stage cultivator. Xiaohua, who was watching from afar, was shocked. He thought to himself, I wonder what rank this flying leopard beast is. It actually has such great strength and is so arrogant. Just as he was thinking, the flying leopard beast's vigorous body made a beautiful turn in the air. Its pair of green eyes emitted a flirtatious light as it looked at Xiaohua's thunder ship. Oh no! Xiaohua was shocked. Even without his reminder, Zhenyu was already flustered. Under the circulation of her magic power, the thunder ship did not dare to stop. It looked for a direction and fled in panic. Wu, seeing the thunder ship fly away, the flying leopard beast let out a long roar. Its body flashed again and it flapped its wings, chasing after the thunder ship at an even faster speed than before. Even with Zhenqing's speed, she could not outrun the flying leopard beast. How could Zhenyu escape with the thunder ship? In just a few breaths, the flying leopard beast had caught up to the edge of the thunder ship. This time, the flying leopard beast did not overturn the thunder ship. Instead, it bared its fangs and brandished its claws, grabbing at an aura refining stage cultivator on the thunder ship. At the same time, the flying leopard beast's tail that sent Zhenqing flying once again swung from behind and struck the thunder ship. The lightning ship was protected by a talisman. However, the talisman was extremely thin under the tremendous strength of the winged leopard beast. The winged leopard beast's tail slashed through the light, and the hurricane in the air poured into the lightning ship, blowing everyone into the air. Everyone had already planned for this. Once the defense was broken, they would activate their flying talismans and flee in panic, fearing that the flying leopard beast would find them. At the same time, the entire thunderbolt also swayed and fell rapidly from the sky. Xiaohua was naturally not an exception. His flying speed was extremely fast. Even if the other 20 disciples were attacked by the flying leopard beast, it might not be his turn. Moreover, the person that the flying leopard beast attacked was far away from him at the other end of the thunder ship. It was enough for Xiaohua to escape. However, just as Xiaohua's figure flew into the air, preparing to flee, Xiaohua unconsciously froze where his gaze landed. This flying leopard beast did not attack the 10 arrogant male and female disciples of the Qian and Kuan lightning palaces. Instead, it chose to attack Sun Shu of the Sun Lightning Palace. At this moment, Sun Shu's face was ashen. A jade-like magic tool in his hand emitted a red luster, forming a shield-like defense. He was trying his best to block the flying leopard beast's sharp claws. In the eyes of the winged leopard, the red shield was like a pastry. A casual wave was enough to break it. Helpless, Sun Shu had no choice but to channel his transcendence energy with all his might to maintain the Dharma artifact. His figure could only hover in mid-air. At this moment, Zhen Qing had already stabilized herself in the distance. Seeing the flying leopard beast attacking Sun Shu's expression changed drastically. He pointed at Serenity Seeker beside him, and Serenity Seeker followed him to the Thunder Ship. Zhen Yu, who was controlling the Thunder Ship, was in an even worse state. By the time he managed to stabilize the Thunder Ship, he was already far away from the flying leopard beast. It was already too late for him to move. What should I do? Xiaohua thought to himself. Seeing that the light in Sun Shu's hand was getting dimmer and dimmer, Xiaohua knew that her transcendence energy would not be able to hold on for much longer. If not for the winged leopard destroying the shield playfully, Sun Shu would have long been killed by the sharp claws. Xiaohua calculated in his mind. He felt that his flying speed was slower than the flying leopard beast, but wasn't Zhen Qing right behind the flying leopard beast? If he hid behind Zhen Qing, he would have some confidence. Therefore Xiaohua no longer hesitated. He activated the hibernating thunder escape and flew towards the flying leopard beast. Sun Shu's heart was like dead ashes. She did not expect the flying leopard beast to attack her. Moreover, her senior sister from Thunder Palace did not hesitate at all and had already escaped far away. She did not even have a helper. Actually, at this moment she did not blame her senior sister Li. Even if their identities were switched, her first choice would probably be to be similar to her. However, when the flying leopard beast destroyed her magic weapon playfully, she felt a kind of sorrow as a cultivator, a kind of extreme desolation. The flying leopard beast in front of her stirred up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Sun Shu almost did not have the strength to breathe. The flying leopard beast quickly destroyed her magic weapon a few times and seemed to have lost its patience. It stretched out its sharp claws, and the magic weapon in Sun Shu's hand was knocked away by a huge force. Before Sun Shu could take out her yellow talisman, the sharp claws had already touched her chest. One could imagine, in the blink of an eye, her beautiful curves would turn into blood. Sun Shu closed her eyes mournfully. Strangely, her heart was very calm. However, at this moment Xiaohua arrived. Sun Shu felt a warm arm wrap around her waist. A somewhat familiar yet somewhat unfamiliar voice sounded in her ears. Don't use your magic power. Then a biting wind sounded in Sun Shu's ears. Immediately after, the flying leopard beast's furious roar was left behind her. Chapter 1598. Xiaohua used the hibernating thunder escape and grabbed Sun Shu's waist, saving her from the flying leopard's claws. Then, without stopping, he immediately flew away. However, even though Xiaohua's speed was extremely fast, the flying leopard's tail was even faster. A shadow flashed past, and the flying leopard's tail, which was harder than an iron rod, attacked Xiaohua's waist from top to bottom. Xiaohua had already planned this when he flew over. The tip of the devil's spear in his hand was already ready. Seeing the flying leopard's tail attack, he immediately went up to meet it. Just like when he was dealing with Zhen Qing, the flying leopard's tail also swayed slightly, wanting to dodge the devil's spear. However, Xiaohua's wrist moved slightly, and the devil's spear seemed to be attracted by the flying leopard's tail. With a slight tremble, a few other devil spear tips suddenly appeared and stabbed out with the flying leopard's tail. Pa! The flying leopard's tail hit the devil spear tip. A force that Xiaohua had never encountered before rushed into the devil spear tip. At this moment, Xiaohua's devil spear tip moved again. He actually used the devil spear tip to change the direction of the flying leopard's tail's attack and borrowed the force to fly towards Zhen Qing. This unforeseen event happened in a few breaths of time. The bystanders who were fleeing in panic didn't see it clearly. Only a few disciples who had flown away earlier occasionally released their divine sense and saw Xiaohua holding Sun Shu and flying to Zhen Qing's side. Zhen Qing was originally shocked, but when she saw Xiaohua suddenly fly out and was strangely sent flying to her side by the flying leopard beast, she was shocked, but at the same time, a relaxed expression appeared on her face. Go! Zhen Qing shouted. Netherseeker once again increased its speed. The sound waves on it wrapped around the flying leopard. At this moment, the flying leopard was somewhat irritable. Its head swayed rapidly as if it wasn't used to the sound attack. Immediately, the flying leopard's limbs stiffened. The soundless wave began to take effect. The flying leopard let out a long roar and suddenly expanded, charging towards Zhen Qing. Ah! Even though Zhen Qing wasn't afraid of the winged leopard, Xiaohua and Sun Shu were by his side, so he couldn't help but protect them. Right at this moment, a voice resounded. "Fellow Taoist, who's up ahead?" Subsequently, a resounding cry of a bird resounded. Caw. The bird's chirp was extremely loud and clear, as if it could pierce through heaven and earth. The winged leopard beast stopped abruptly when it heard the chirp. It looked in the direction of the sound in shock before diving into the clouds below and flying underground without looking back. Someone's coming? Xiao Hua's heart was also beating violently. He was still in a state of shock, but when he heard the chirping of birds and human voices, he was overjoyed. He hurriedly let go of Sun Shu, allowing him to activate the flight talisman. He stood to the side with a complicated expression. Although Sun Shu knew that the danger had passed, she was the same as Xiao Hua, unable to immediately calm down. Her towering chest violently heaved up and down. "I am the Imperial Thunder Sect's Zhen Qing. May I know which fellow Taoist has arrived?" When Zhen Qing saw that the flying leopard had disappeared, he didn't chase after it. Instead, he pointed at the flying leopard above his head. He looked up with a trace of luck on his face. Layers of floating clouds in the distance were blown away by the hurricane. After the hurricane, an unbelievably large bird beast appeared in Xiao Hua's field of vision. The bird beast looked like an ibis. It had a slender neck and a slender beak. Its black and white feathers fluttered in the wind. Ah! Xiao Hua almost wanted to rub his eyes. He couldn't believe that it was so big. It was almost the same size as Zhen Qing's thunder boat. On the back of the bird was a golden core old man with white hair and beard. He had his hands behind his back and was leisurely looking over. "Howling Night Ibis." Zhen Qing's eyes narrowed as he shouted. He then looked around. At this moment, Zhen Yu had already driven the thunder boat into the air. The disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect who had scattered in all directions were also gathering here. "Are you a fellow Taoist from the Seven Skills Sect?" Zhen Qing transmitted his voice. "Haha, Thunder Boat. So it's a fellow Taoist from the Imperial Thunder Sect." The Golden Core Cultivator laughed loudly. The Howling Night Ibis spread its wings and stopped not too far away from Zhen Qing. So it's fellow Taoist Wei Chongxi. Clearly, Zhen Qing was familiar with the Golden Core Cultivator. He had a faint smile on his face as he cupped his hands and smiled. "Haha, fellow Taoist Zhen? Are you also going to the Tai Ching sect to participate in the Feather Immortal Gathering? How come? Did you encounter something here?" Wei Chongxi smiled as he looked at the thunder boat behind Zhen Qing and the qi refining disciples who were flying over from all directions. "I won't hide it from fellow Taoist Wei. Just now, a flying leopard suddenly attacked us. However, under the resistance of my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples, the flying leopard was unable to escape." Zhen Qing said indifferently. "Huh? Flying leopard?" Wei Chongxi pretended to be surprised and shouted, "That's a 5th-rank spiritual beast. Fellow Taoist Zhen, your strength is about the same as the flying leopard. However, you don't seem to be as fast as the flying leopard, right? You also don't have the tyrannical strength of the flying leopard, right?" Then he looked at the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples curiously and said with grief, "Your sect's disciples didn't suffer any casualties." Zhen Qing smiled and said, "Thanks to the Seven Skills Sect, your sect's Howling Night Ibis is also a 5th-rank spiritual beast. Its cry had already scared the flying leopard away. The winged leopard beast is so powerful that it overturned your sect's thunder boat. Even with fellow Taoist Zhen leading the way, the winged leopard beast couldn't be chased away. How could a mere guard beast of my Seven Skills Sect be able to chase it away? Fellow Taoist Zhen, you're exaggerating." Wei Chongxi was immensely proud. He lowered his head to look below and said, "This is the edge of Ink Cloud Black Forest. It's a place where spiritual beasts roam. If fellow Taoist Zhen doesn't mind, why don't we head to Tai Ching sect together?" Zhen Qing pondered for a moment. He knew that there was a barrier between the Seven Skills Sect and the Imperial Thunder Sect. However, who could say that there wasn't a barrier between the Seven Skills Sect and the Xuanyan School? No matter what, the two cultivation sects were from the country of Xi. Compared to the cultivation sects from the country of Meng and the country of Lian, they should have a common enemy. There shouldn't be any problems on the way to Tai Ching sect. Of course, the 5 cultivation sects of the country of Xi would often travel together. Therefore, Zhen Qing only thought for a moment before cupping his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist Wei, since you're so kind, I wouldn't dare to refuse. Alright, then my Seven Skills Sect will ride the Howling Night Ibis first and the Imperial Thunder Sect will follow behind. As fellow Taoist wishes." Alright, Wei Chongxi didn't seem to move, but the whistling night ibis stopped in midair and let out a long cry. Its black and white wings suddenly flapped, and the several chi condensation cultivators on its back flew away in the blink of an eye, carrying the dozen or so peak 12th layer chi condensation cultivators. Zhen Qing turned his head to look at Xiaohua and waved his hand. "Let's go." Then the three of them flew onto the thunder boat. After everyone boarded the thunder boat, Zhen Qing personally took control and chased after the howling night ibis. Sun Shu followed behind Xiaohua and landed on the thunder boat. As soon as Xiaohua touched the ground, he sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to cultivate. Seeing this, Sun Shu hesitated. After a while, he said in a low voice, "Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, thank you for saving my life." Then he didn't go far. Instead, he found a place around Xiaohua and sat down cross-legged, cultivating diligently. The other 18 aura refining disciples were in stark contrast to the two of them. Among them, several had witnessed what happened just now and were whispering to the disciples they were familiar with. They'd naturally experienced Xiaohua's flying speed, but it was still slower than the flying leopard. They couldn't understand why Xiaohua would disregard his own life to save Sun Shu. Of course, with just a few words, everyone was like the people in the marketplace, using the words "beauty doesn't captivate people" to explain it. Naturally, Yuan Bo's expression became even more unsightly. Yuan Bo and Min Ji's thoughts didn't need to be said. They were both worldly disciples and could be considered second class in the Imperial Thunder sect. If they could find a female direct disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect to dual cultivate with, needless to say, they'd have a solid foundation in the Imperial Thunder sect in the future. Sun Shu and Xue Xue were both Sun Ming's disciples, and Sun Ming was a gold core cultivator. How could the two of them not be envious of such a backer? Not to mention that Sun Shu and Xue Xue were first-class beauties. Even if they were Wu Yen, the two of them would still cover their eyes with a handkerchief and recognize them as beauties. However, Xue Xue entered the Imperial Thunder sect with Xiaohua and was previously treated coldly by Yuan Bo and the others. Although Min Gu felt that Xue Xue was close to Xiaohua, when he thought about his appearance, his background and his cultivation, he always felt a trace of luck in his heart. As for Yuan Bo, he had already separated from Min Gu and was eyeing Sun Shu. Although Sun Shu couldn't see any connection with Xiaohua, Xiaohua saved Sun Shu and Sun Shu was sitting close to Xiaohua and cultivating like a little bird relying on a human. Yuan Bo already felt that something was wrong, so how could he not have any thoughts? On the contrary, Wang Yunxiao listened to everyone's discussion and looked at Yuan Bo's expression, but he didn't say a word. Xiaohua sat on the thunder boat and released his Buddhist awareness. He slowly scanned the crowd and stopped around Zhen Qing. Zhen Qing didn't feel anything, she only released her divine sense to the maximum. She was constantly scanning the area, afraid that she would encounter another spirit beast surprise attack. Seeing that the gold core stage Zhen Qing couldn't sense his Buddhist awareness, Xiaohua was satisfied and withdrew his Buddhist awareness. Shortly after, he opened his eyes slightly and looked at Sun Shu who was cultivating beside him. He then looked at the many disciples who were gesticulating and snorted coldly from his nose and started cultivating. Several days later they saw the edge of the ink cloud black forest and there were no more dangers. Exhausted, Zhen Qing handed over the thunder boat to Zhen Yu and sat beside Xiaohua. She took out a medicinal pill and swallowed it, closing her eyes to recover her magic power. After waiting for 2 hours, Zhen Qing opened her eyes and looked at Xiaohua. She transmitted her voice. "Xiaohua, what you used just now, was it the hibernating thunder escape?" Xiaohua opened his eyes, looked at Zhen Qing and nodded slightly. Seeing that Xiaohua confirmed her guess, Zhen Qing didn't feel happy. Instead, she was even more confused. The hibernating thunder escape was naturally not something that Xiaohua, an aura-refining disciple of the Thunderclap Palace, could successfully cultivate. However, Zhen Qing didn't ask too much. She smiled and transmitted her voice. "You're very good. I owe you a favor." Xiaohua shook his head slightly. After thinking for a moment, he said in a low voice, "If Grandmaster feels that it's inappropriate, then play another song for disciple." Chapter 1599. Ha ha, what's so difficult about that? Zhen Qing laughed loudly. She took out a flute and placed it next to her lips. A melodious tune once again flowed on the thunder boat. Xiaohua smiled. He entered the space again with the rhythm of the tune. His body's true energy was also slowly circulating under the influence of the heavenly law's embodiment technique. After the tune ended, Zhen Qing stood up and released her divine sense. She said, "Disciples, we are now in Meng Empire. We will reach Taiqing sect in a few days. There is no danger in between. Cultivate more and strive to win glory for our Imperial Thunder sect in the Feather Immortal Gathering." Yes, thank you for your teachings, martial ancestor. The disciples said in unison and closed their eyes to cultivate. Xiao Hua's slightly opened eyes were filled with confusion. He muttered in his heart, "What's going on? Last time when martial ancestor Zhen played the tune, my cultivation increased rapidly. It's more than a month's worth of cultivation. But why didn't the tune have any effect?" Forget it, forget it. Music is martial ancestor Zhen's cultivation method. It's enough that I can get some benefits. What else can I ask for? Xiao Hua closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. Although Sun Shu, who was beside Xiao Hua, had been cultivating with her eyes closed, her mind was always in a mess. No matter what, she couldn't calm down. She couldn't cultivate at all. This was not surprising. Sun Shu had always lived in the Sun Lei Palace. With Sun Ming, an Oris core stage cultivator, as her master, she had many privileges in the Imperial Thunder sect. Many people protected her and doted on her. Even if it was a routine training, there would always be disciples around to protect her. She had experienced the feeling of life and death before, but the coldness and self-preservation of others in the line of life and death shattered something in her heart. It made her understand what it meant to be heartless and to protect oneself. She was thinking and reflecting, so she couldn't cultivate in peace. Sure enough, in the next few days the thunder boat flew very smoothly. Every day, several Seven Skills Sect disciples with profound cultivation would come over to interact with the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples. However, Xiao Hua's cultivation was only at the early stage of qi refining stage, so he was never the center of attention. Most of the time, it was the disciples of the Qian and Kuan lightning palaces who came out to receive him. As for whether they sat together to chat or discuss their cultivation experiences, Xiao Hua didn't care. On the other hand, Sun Shu was even colder than before. Occasionally he would stand up and look at the scenery outside the thunder boat. His brows were slightly furrowed as if he had something on his mind. It must be because he suddenly saw the fickleness of human nature and found it hard to adapt, right? On this day in front of the thunder boat, a fiery red sun rose from the east. Endless brilliance shone over the entire land. Under that red sun, 3 towering mountains stood in the sky. The Taiqing sect is up ahead. Zhen Qing, who was standing at the edge of the thunder boat with her sleeves folded, was illuminated by the orange sunlight. There was an indescribable expression on her face. Hearing this, Xiao Hua stopped cultivating and stood up. He walked to the edge of the thunder boat and looked as far as his eyes could see. The 3 mountains were like 3 pillars that supported the heavens and the earth, supporting the heaven and earth. It is said that when the heaven and earth were first created, there was a massive chaos. A Same was born from the chaos and split the chaos. Yang was the heaven and the Yin was the earth. Later on, afraid that the heaven and earth would merge, the Saint created the heaven, earth and human peaks to support the heaven and earth. The Taiqing sect's heaven, earth and human peaks boast that they are the pillars that the Saint supports the heaven and earth. Seeing Xiao Hua stand up and look, Zhen Qing said in a low voice, "The Taiqing sect itself is divided into the heaven sect, earth sect and human sect. They are located in the 3 peaks." Martial ancestor, disciple has a question. Xiao Hua stared at the mountain for a long time, then bowed and asked, "Say it." Zhen Qing had a good impression of Xiao Hua, so she said with a smile, "Since it is the pillar that supports the heaven and earth, then just fly up and see if there is a peak on this mountain." Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and said with a smile, "Haha." Zhen Qing was stunned at first, then she clapped her hands and said, "This idea is simple. But, do you think the Taiqing sect's cultivators wouldn't think of it? Could it be that this is really the pillar of heaven?" Xiao Hua's body shook and he said in disbelief, "But, disciple thinks that even if they want to support the heaven and earth, they can't be gathered together, right? Wouldn't it be better if they were scattered?" Zhen Qing said unhappily, "When did this old man say that this is the pillar of heaven? This is just the Taiqing sect's boasting. Who would believe it? As for whether the heaven, earth and human peaks have a peak or not, I'm afraid only the Taiqing sect's cultivators know." "Won't we know if we fly up and see?" Xiao Hua said casually. Zhen Qing said with a smile, "Xiao Hua, I'm afraid you haven't flown up to the sky before, right?" Xiao Hua was stunned, then he nodded and said, "Yes, why would disciple fly up to the sky for no reason? And then have you escaped underground before?" "Of course," Xiao Hua answered honestly. "Presumably, once you reach a certain depth you won't be able to go any deeper, right?" Zhen Qing said with a smile. "Yes." Xiao Hua nodded, then said, "According to what martial ancestor said, flying to the heavens is also ordinary. And that's right, the sky isn't as calm as you think. Above us there are astral winds, thunder winds, heavenly winds and so on. The higher we go, the more profound our cultivation is. Who would take the risk to see whether the three peaks have a peak? Xiaohua never thought that the azure sky above his head would have so many dangers. He was shocked, but he bowed and said, "Many thanks for martial ancestors' teachings." And Jen Qing waved her hand and said with a smile, "You have the hidden fire physique, so your true qi is the hardest to control. Your state of mind is very important. Remember that there is always a sky above the sky and there will always be someone better than you." While she was talking, the whistling night ibis flying in front of the thunderbolt suddenly cried out, and that sharp cry once again resounded through the sky. This thing. Did it run into another spirit beast? After several days of observation, Xiaohua knew that the whistling night ibis loved to fight. Whenever a spirit beast appeared nearby, it would cry out in protest. If it weren't for the 7 skills sect's disciples restraining it, it would have already fought several rounds. Just as the whistling night ibis cried out, a dragon's roar that was many times more majestic than a bird's cry came from the Tai Ching sect. Although the dragon's roar was very far away, it sounded like it was ringing in Xiaohua's heart. The magic power around Xiaohua's body suddenly froze, and he couldn't move his body. Little White. Xiaohua was delighted. This dragon's roar sounded very familiar. Immediately, the dragon transformation art that Xiaohua had been cultivating in his meridians sped up. His true qi flowed through his meridians, and the magic power in his body began to flow again. He looked at Jen Qing, who was beside him, and frowned. She glanced at Zhen Yu, who was controlling the thunderbolt, and found that he wasn't affected much. The thunderbolt sank a few feet, then flew up again. But the 7 skills sect disciples in the distance were in a miserable state. Obviously, the dragon's roar was targeted at the whistling night ibis. Wherever the dragon's roar went, the whistling night ibis was immediately bound and fell from the sky like a rock. The 7 skills sect's 2 main disciples, Wei Chongxi and Qing Xiang, used their magic power to break free from the bindings. The 2 of them flew into the sky, but the other dozen or so qi-refining disciples were in a miserable state. They fell from the sky like the whistling night ibis. Go quickly. Seeing this, Jen Qing's face was expressionless. She urged her magic power and the entire thunderbolt flew towards where the 7 skills sect disciples fell. Wei Chongxi and Qing Xiang couldn't take care of all the disciples, so they could only catch 3 or 4 of them. The others were still falling. Evil creatures. Just as the Imperial Thunder sect's thunderbolt caught a few disciples, a fiery red dragon that was dozens of feet long flew over from the distant horizon. A furious roar came from the dragon's head. Roar, another dragon's roar resounded through the heavens and earth. Everyone felt their bodies become lighter and their magic power could be used again. Not only were the dozen or so disciples lifted into the air in a panic, the whistling night ibis also struggled to stabilize themselves. After everyone calmed down, the fiery red dragon also flew in front of everyone. Sigh, too bad it's not Little White. Looking at the huge dragon's head not far away, Xiaohua was a bit disappointed. This dragon's head didn't seem to be comparable to Little White. The dragon's head was clearly visible, but it was more like a snake's head. There was only a single horn protruding from the top of the snake's head, and there was also a hint of a dragon's horn. Then there were the 2 faint dragon whiskers that grew from the sides of the snake's mouth. Looking at the dragon's body that was dozens of feet thick, the scales on its body had just taken the shape of dragon scales. There were also 3 dragon claws that were smaller than an infant's fist that had just grown out from its abdomen. Is this how the Tai Ching sect treats their guests? Wei Chongxi was enraged. He flew in front of the dragon and stared at the golden core cultivator on the dragon's head as he shouted, "I am the Tai Ching sect's Dao Qing. Greetings, fellow Taoist from the 7 Possibilities sect." On the dragon's head was a middle-aged cultivator. 3 strands of long beard fluttered in the wind. He had a very calm expression as he bowed and spoke. However, at this moment the dragon once again displayed its might. It raised its head to the sky and roared. Its body flew, and its huge dragon head entered the 7 Possibilities sect and the Imperial Thunder sect. Only when the dragon's head touched the Imperial Thunder sect's thunder ship did it stop. Ah? The Imperial Thunder sect's people were shocked. They trembled in fear and didn't dare to move. Xiaohua's heart also turned cold. He immediately stopped cultivating the dragonization art. The dragon's head that was several times bigger than the thunder ship was touching the edge of the thunder ship. The snake's eyes, which looked even bigger than Xiaohua's, were emotionless. It coldly scanned the people on the thunder ship. As if it didn't find anything, it suddenly hissed and flicked its tongue left and right on the thunder ship. Although Xiaohua was very close to Little White in the past, The dragon's fierce aura enveloped the entire thunder ship. The snake's tongue seemed to be an extremely powerful magic tool. As long as it touched it, it could crush him into meat paste. Oh, how could he dare to move? Taoist Dao Qing, what is the meaning of this? Zhen Qing naturally didn't dare to move under the dragon's might. She shouted in a deep voice, "Evil creature." Dao Qing clapped his hand and a strange jade rui appeared in his hand. He activated his magic power and waved it slightly. The dragon shook its head as if it was very unwilling. However, it couldn't disobey the jade rui's command. It could only open its mouth, raise its head and fly back. Chapter 1600. Xiao Hua was currently under the snake's head. The fishy smell from the snake's mouth made him feel extremely uncomfortable. He thought to himself, "Damn it, little white's mouth seems to be very fragrant. Why is this thing so disgusting?" Dao Qing restrained the python dragon and stood on the dragon's head. He bowed and said, "I wonder which fellow Taoist from the Imperial Thunder Sect has graced my Taiching sect with your presence?" "I am Zhen Qing." Zhen Qing returned the greeting. "All right, I'll let fellow Taoist Zhen Qing know that the python dragon of my sect has never acted recklessly. Just now, it was the Seven Skills sect's howling night ibis that provoked my sect." The python dragon ignored Ai's restraint and flew out. "As for why it came to visit your sect's thunderboat, I don't know either. However, no matter what, it has disturbed your sect's disciples. My Taiching sect will compensate. I will immediately report this matter to the deacon when I return to the sect. I hope fellow Taoist Zhen and the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect can understand." When Dao Qing said this, his voice wasn't very soft. Naturally, the disciples of the Seven Skills sect could hear him. Wei Chongxi originally wanted to aggressively demand an explanation from the Taiching sect. However, after listening to Dao Qing's words, he realized that it wasn't right. How could he blame the Taiching sect's python dragon? How could he not know the temper of his own spirit beast? A few days ago he was showing off his spirit beast in front of the Imperial Thunder sect's disciples. Who would have thought that he would run into a hard nut today? The Seven Skills sect's face was completely destroyed. Several of their disciples were even saved by the Imperial Thunder sect's thunderbolt. After Dao Qing finished speaking, he glanced at Wei Chongxi. Seeing that he didn't intend to pursue the matter, he continued, "This year my Taiching sect is holding the Feather Immortal Gathering. We've specially set the venue on the Flying Sky Peak. Everyone please wait for a moment. I will summon my disciples and send everyone to the Flying Sky Peak." After he finished speaking, he sent out a yellow talisman. A moment later, a red-crowned crane flew over. On the red-crowned crane stood a mid-stage Foundation Establishment disciple. "Dao Jing, send the fellow Taoists from the country of Shi's Seven Skills sect and the Imperial Thunder sect to the Flying Sky Peak." Dao Qing instructed. Yes, disciple obeys. Dao Jing steered the crane and led the way. Zhen Qing and Wei Chongxi cupped their hands at Dao Qing and bid him farewell. They steered the thunderboat and the howling night ibis to follow the crane. Dao Qing stood on the python dragon and frowned as he watched everyone disappear. The actions of the python dragon today were indeed suspicious. Ignoring the fact that the provocation of the howling night ibis could make the python dragon fly out of the abyss of cultivation, just the fact that the python dragon had stuck its head onto the thunderboat of the Imperial Thunder sect disciples made him even more suspicious. Could it be that the thunder-controlling sect's thunderboat has something that the python dragon is interested in? But that's not right. It seems that the boa dragon didn't pay much attention to the thunderboat after that. Unfortunately, the eyes of the dragon under Dao Qing's feet were slightly closed, as if it was asleep. Dao Qing didn't know how to ask, so after a while, he stomped his feet again. The dragon turned around and flew back to the Taiching sect. Xiao Hua and the others steered the thunderboat and followed Dao Jing's crane to the west. At this moment, Wei Chongxi was somewhat listless and no longer had his previous arrogance. The Seven Skills sect disciples didn't return to the Howling Night Ibis's back and only stayed on the Imperial Thunder sect's thunderboat to chat with the disciples they were familiar with. In just a short moment, a small mountain floating in the air appeared before everyone's eyes. Countless clouds lingered below the small mountain. Although they still couldn't see the scenery above the small mountain clearly, just the scene alone made them feel like they were in a fairyland. The Yen Thunder Palace's Yen Thunder Palace was in the air. The Imperial Thunder sect disciples had seen it before, but it was only a palace. At a glance, they knew it was created by the Imperial Thunder sect's ancestors. The Taiching sect's small mountain was very large. There was no need to mention its weight. If it was created by the Taiching sect cultivators, How powerful would their divine ability be? However, if golden core cultivators like Zhen Qing swept their divine sense over it and didn't see any spiritual energy fluctuations, they would think that the small mountain was created by the gods. Then, who would believe it? Xiaohua was dumbfounded like everyone else. He also stared at the huge mountain in a daze. When they got closer, they saw that the small mountain was indeed floating in the air abruptly. There was no place below it that was in contact with the ground. Thousands of clouds gathered and dissipated from time to time under the small mountain. It was no different from what they usually saw. Within the clouds on the small mountain, there were green pine trees and green bamboos. The green mountains and clear waters reflected each other. Not long after, there were deer and young rabbits running away in a panic, startling the birds and beasts resting by the stream. The movement made people feel relaxed and happy. As expected of the Tai Ching sect. Such a quiet place is a good place to cultivate. Xiaohua looked envious and sighed secretly. Seniors, this is where the Tai Ching sect's disciples usually cultivate. It's called the Bright Realm. Because the Feather Immortal Gathering this time is related to the Bright Realm, my sect master specially held the Feather Immortal Gathering in the Bright Realm. Dao Qing held a horsetail whisk in his hand. He swung it naturally and said with a smile. When Zhen Qing heard this, she felt a little strange. She frowned and said, "The Feather Immortal Gathering is held once every 10 years. This year it's the Tai Ching sect's turn. What does it have to do with the Bright Realm?" "Haha, I'm going to keep you in suspense." Dao Jing smiled proudly and said, "When the Feather Immortal Gathering is held, Senior Zhen will naturally know." Wei Chongxi snorted coldly and said, "It's just an illusion. Who doesn't have it?" Dao Jing had a good temper and didn't argue. He raised his hand and sent out a communication talisman. Then he smiled and said, "Seniors, please." Just as he said the word please, another signal flew into the sky from the southwest. What a coincidence today. 3 sects came in a row. Dao Jing looked at the signal and turned to ask Zhen Qing and Wei Chongxi, "Seniors, do you want to go to the Bright Realm first or wait here for a while?" Zhen Qing glanced at Wei Chongxi and said, "I think we should wait here for a while. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome if we have to greet them after entering the Bright Realm." "Ah, I have the same idea," Wei Chongxi said with a smile. As they were talking, a snow-white crane flew over from the southwest. Behind the crane, there was a dazzling phoenix boat that broke through the clouds in the sky and slowly flew over. "Are you kidding me?" When Xiaohua saw the phoenix boat, he had a strange feeling. My Imperial Thunder sect has 20 disciples. 1 lightning boat is enough. This phoenix boat is probably several times bigger than the lightning boat. This sect has 50 to 60 disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering? What's there to see? In the country of Shi, the country of Meng, and the country of Lian, other than the Huanhua sect, who else would be so bored? There are less than 20 disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering. Why would they send such a big phoenix boat? Wei Chongxi snorted and said in a low voice. "Huanhua sect?" When Xiaohua heard this, he was overjoyed and his eyes lit up. If Fairy Hongxia had joined the Huanhua sect, it would have been several years. With Fairy Hongxia's talent, even if she hadn't reached the late stage of the 12th layer of the Qi refining stage, she would at least be in the middle stage of the 12th layer of the Qi refining stage. She would most likely be qualified to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly. When he thought of Fairy Hongxia, Xiaohua's heaven-like beauty immediately appeared in his mind. The phoenix boat was very big and flew very slowly. When it stopped, there were indeed only a dozen disciples that flew down from the phoenix boat. The one in front was a golden core stage cultivator. When he looked behind the golden core stage cultivator, he saw that the dozen disciples were all handsome men and beautiful women. They were all talents. Fairy Hongxia. At the front of the dozen disciples, wasn't it the peerless Fairy Hongxia? "Fellow Taoist Wei, fellow Taoist Zhen, I greet you." The golden core stage cultivator at the front also had long eyebrows and a sharp nose. He had a jade-like aura. "So it's fellow Taoist Xiong Fei. It's been so many years since we last met, you're still as magnificent as ever." At this moment, Wei Chongxi's face changed into a smile as he went up to greet them. Zhen Qing also went up and cupped his hands in greeting. Xiaohua did not care about what the 3 golden core stage cultivators were saying. His gaze was always on Fairy Hongxia. Fairy Hongxia still had that cold look on her face. Her brows were slightly furrowed and she looked straight ahead, not looking at anyone else. Perhaps because Xiaohua had been staring at her for too long, Fairy Hongxia sensed something. She turned her head slightly and her gaze swept toward Xiaohua. Dong dong dong, Xiaohua's heart thumped. She's about to see me. However, when Fairy Hong Xia's gaze swept past Xiaohua, it was as though Xiaohua was a stranger. She did not seem to stop. It can't be? Xiaohua's heart turned cold. Just as Xiaohua was feeling disappointed, Fairy Hong Xia's face froze. Her gaze immediately swept back. When she saw Xiaohua's face clearly, her two eyes unconsciously widened. She actually stared at Xiaohua's face and stared. In her eyes was a trace of surprise and a trace of disbelief. Junior sister Hong Xia, let's go. At this moment, a handsome figure stood between Xiaohua and Fairy Hong Xia. He said to Fairy Hong Xia with concern. Oh? Xiaohua frowned. When he saw the person's appearance, he was stunned. He naturally knew this person. It was Yun Guichong, the person he saw when he participated in the Huanhua sect's disciple selection. This guy is also at the peak of Qi refining stage level 12. Xiaohua sighed inwardly. I actually forgot about this person. That day Kai Zhuoxia said that this guy covets Fairy Hong Xia. Thinking that Yun Guichong and Fairy Hong Xia were from the same sect, Xiaohua could not help but feel sour in his heart. At this moment, the leaders of the three sects had already greeted each other. They spoke as they flew forward. Yun Guichong called Fairy Hong Xia to follow behind Xiong Fei. Fairy Hong Xia retracted her gaze and nodded slightly. She walked away without looking at Xiaohua again. Beside Fairy Hong Xia, Yun Guichong followed closely. The other disciples of the Huanhua sect were 2 steps behind them. Seeing Yun Guichong being so intimate with Fairy Hong Xia, and then looking at Fairy Hong Xia who did not look back, Xiaohua's heart ached. It was as if the dream in his heart had suddenly shattered. And after it shattered, it revealed his own delusion. Sigh, everything is just my delusion. Xiaohua laughed bitterly. I only met her once and did her a favor. Moreover, she has already given me the reward. What else am I thinking? It's impossible for a toad to eat swan meat. Chapter 1601. Thinking about it, Xiaohua had only met Fairy Hong Xia once in the Kai family of Luyang. Even though she had the intention to protect him at that time, it was because he had sent Kai Zhuoxia's corpse back home. At that time, he was just a mediocre 4th-layer Qi refining cultivator. How could he enter Fairy Hong Xia's eyes? Now, even though Xiaohua had already become a 12th-layer Qi refining cultivator and was a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, but, among the dozens of cultivators in front of him, which one of them did not have a higher cultivation than Xiaohua? Which sect did not have a stronger background than Xiaohua? After thinking about it, Xiaohua's interest waned. His head drooped and he looked very listless as he walked behind the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect, waiting to enter the Bright Realm. Dao Jing and the cultivator who had led the disciples of the Huanhua sect over just now each took out a yellow talisman from their bosoms and activated their magic power. The yellow talisman let out a clear cry and spiraled up like a flying crane. It was thrown into the Bright Realm in midair. Immediately there was a soft dang sound like the sound of a bell. Between the white clouds at the bottom of the Bright Realm, there was a 5-colored brilliance. Every brilliance condensed into a bridge, slowly extending to the feet of everyone. Seniors, please. Dao Jing cupped his hands and said. He was the first to step onto the Bridge of Light. Just like how he entered the Yanlei Palace, the Bridge of Light slowly shrank and pulled Dao Jing's figure into the white clouds. As Dao Jing stepped onto the Bridge of Light, Zhen Qing, Wei Chongxi, Xiong Fei and the others looked at each other. They also took a step forward and entered the Bridge of Light. The Bridge of Light was not fast and there was no defensive brilliance on it. Xiaohua's figure slowly rose along with the Bridge of Light. The strong mountain wind blew his clothes up. His heart that had been heated up just now gradually cooled down. He raised his eyes and looked at the Bridge of Light that was not too far away from him. Fairy Hong Xia and Yun Jiechong were almost completely leaning against each other. Xiaohua's mouth revealed a trace of a bitter smile. This Yun Jiechong is a man of striking appearance. Not only is he a talent in cultivation, he is also from a cultivator's family. Now they are even fellow disciples of the same sect. What am I? I am just a rogue cultivator. What am I thinking? He was just a toad. Even if you have a bit of a cultivation base, when Kai Zhuoxia met Li Zongbao, the two of them clearly had feelings for each other. However, because of certain things, neither of them could confide in the other. How could the matters of the world be resolved simply by mutual love? Xiaohua was in a bad mood, so the bystanders naturally ignored him. However, Sun Shu, who was not far from him, could see clearly. Sun Shu was very curious about Xiaohua. From Shue's mouth, Sun Shu knew that Shui relied on Xiaohua to pass the disciple selection. Sun Shu originally thought that Xiaohua and Shui had some kind of relationship, but when he heard that the two had only met twice, he couldn't help but be surprised. Although Sun Shu didn't have much experience in the outside world, he had heard from many disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect that the disciple selection process was very cruel. Even blood brothers had to be separated, let alone strangers. Of course, what Sun Shu was most dissatisfied with was Xiaohua's cultivation level. He actually advanced from the middle of the 10th layer to the early stage of the 12th layer in such a short time. This was simply impossible for a loose cultivator in her impression. A few days ago, Xiaohua actually risked his life to save her from the claws of the flying leopard beast. This made her thoroughly recognize Xiaohua's true colors. This person was indeed different from other cultivators. He seems to be really mysterious. Sun Shu stole a glance at the unwell Xiaohua and thought, the flying technique he used before was different from the one he used in the illusion. It seems to be the lightning evasion technique. He's only a cultivator at the early stage of the 12th layer. How could he practice the lightning evasion technique? It looks very dispirited. What's going on? When everyone reached the bright realm, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth that assaulted their faces shook their spirits. The spiritual qi here was more than twice as dense as what they usually saw. Xiong Fei released his divine sense and took a look. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Dao Jing, why is the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the bright realm so dense? There doesn't seem to be any spirit veins nearby. Indeed, the formations around the bright realm don't have any traces of spirit gathering. I'm also very surprised." Wei Chongxi also said while twirling his beard. Could it be that Senior Wei is also a formation expert? I've been disrespectful. Dao Jing didn't answer in a hurry and instead asked in surprise. Wei Chongxi had a trace of pride on his face. He smiled and said, "Not at all, not at all. I only learned a little from my sect's martial uncle for a few days." Hearing this, not to mention Dao Jing, even Zhen Qing, Xiong Fei and the others had a trace of admiration on their faces. That's right, the study of formations wasn't something that ordinary cultivators could come into contact with. On the Daybreak continent, talisman masters, pill masters and tool refiners were already scarce, not to mention masters who were proficient in even more profound formations. Xiaohua stood behind everyone and suddenly understood why the Deacon of Lightning Hall didn't dare to disturb the sect's formation master when he closed the formation in the eastern ridge. He also understood why the Lightning Tablet Taoist had to give in to the arrogance of the Swallow Thunder Ridge. Junior will keep everyone in suspense. Seniors, please take a look and see why the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the bright realm is so dense. Dao Jing put away his envy and said with a smile, "Let's go, we'll talk as we walk." Show off? Show off again. Xiaohua, who was at the back, disapproved of what he heard. Following the slow pace of everyone, he let out a cold snort. Sure enough, Zhen Qing, Xiong Fei and Wei Chongxi had a trace of awkwardness on their faces. They looked at each other and released their spiritual sense as they walked. However, after walking for a while and looking around the bright realm, they all shook their heads. Wei Chongxi said with some hesitation, "Could it be that the bright realm's formation is a bit strange?" "It is a bit strange, but that's not the real reason." Dao Jing said with a smile. "There's a spirit vein in the mountain below us?" Xiong Fei stamped his feet and asked. Dao Jing shook his head. "Even if there is a spirit vein, isn't it too small?" Xiong Fei was a bit uncomfortable and turned to look at Zhen Qing, who was pondering with her head lowered. Zhen Qing didn't release her spiritual sense after scanning the surroundings earlier. At this moment, her head was lowered and she was looking at the ground. What's strange about the ground? Xiong Fei also lowered her head naturally. The ground below everyone's feet was grayish-brown soil mixed with gravel. There were some indiscernible radiances on the soil that seemed to be some reinforced formations. Why would there be formations on the ground for no reason? They might as well use some limestone or white jade to pave the ground. Xiong Fei couldn't see the reason and muttered in his heart, "Senior Zhen?" Seeing that Zhen Qing seemed to have understood something, Dao Jing asked in a low voice. "Yes, I have thought about it for a long time and feel that what fellow Taoist Wei and fellow Taoist Xiong said is reasonable. Our sects also have paradises, but if there isn't a spirit vein, then there is a formation. Without these two there is only a spirit eye. Could it be that there is a spirit eye in the bright realm?" Spirit eye. It was unknown what the others' expressions were, but Xiaohua revealed a strange expression. "What is a spirit eye?" Hearing Zhen Qing's words, Dao Jing seemed to be relieved and shook his head. Senior Zhen also didn't guess it. At this moment, a person from the Huanhua sect took half a step forward and bowed. I'm Yun Guichong from the Huanhua sect. I've been racking my brains just now, but I still can't figure it out. Senior, please enlighten me. Why is the spiritual aura in the bright realm so abundant? Yun Guichong walked out at the right time. Not only did he remove the awkwardness between the three sects, but his mischievous words also made everyone chuckle. You little brat, your Uncle Master Dao Jing just wants to test your experience. You don't even think about it before you speak. You are so naughty. Xiong Fei glared at Yun Guichong and scolded. Yun Guichong smiled embarrassedly and retreated back to Fairy Hongxia's side. He didn't seem to be ashamed of being scolded by a senior. Qing Jing, who was next to Xiong Fei, blushed a little as if Xiong Fei was talking about him. I'll let the three seniors and fellow cultivators know. Dao Jing didn't dare to keep them in suspense anymore. He cupped his hands and said, Indeed, what you said is about the same. It's just that, you've forgotten that there's a saying under your feet. It's called, I'm destined to be in this mountain. Oh, hearing this, Jen Qing slapped her forehead and said in realization, I also had the same thought just now. Could it be? Could it be that the bright realm itself is a magic treasure? Xiong Fei and Wei Chongxi also understood and said in surprise. The three seniors are really knowledgeable. Dao Jing quickly praised, this bright realm is a magic treasure left behind by the founder of the Taiqing sect. Because it can gather the spiritual aura of heaven and earth, it was placed here as a place for the disciples of the Taiqing sect to cultivate. This is actually a magic treasure? Not only Xiaohua but all the disciples who practiced qi were also surprised. They all lowered their heads and released their divine senses. However, just like before, the ground was like an ordinary ground. Their divine senses passed through it, and they couldn't find anything wrong with it. Only Jen Qing and the other two golden core cultivators carefully observed it and didn't frown. Such a big magic treasure? What is it used for? Could it be used to smash people? Xiaohua stomped his feet and thought to himself, then, how much strength does it have? Oh, it shouldn't be strength, it should be magic power. Oh my, what cultivation level does the senior have to have so much magic power? What a powerful divine will. Seniors, the plaza where the Feather Immortal Assembly is held is at the center of the bright realm. Please follow me. Dao Jing and the others looked at it for a moment, then cupped their hands and flew up with everyone. The bright realm was really big. After flying for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, a flat ground that was several hundred feet wide appeared in front of them. This flat ground seemed to be the peak of a small mountain. It was abnormally flat. There was a huge protrusion on the east side of the flat ground, which was blocked by a restriction. They couldn't see what was inside, but other places were normal. There were countless pavilions around the flat ground. At this moment, some disciples were sitting leisurely inside, meditating or talking. Seniors, this is where the disciples of the Taiqing sect usually cultivate. The Feather Immortal Assembly in 2 days will be held here. The resting places for the disciples of each sect have already been arranged. Dao Jing landed on the flat ground and pointed. Chapter 1602. What's this? Looking at the ordinary flat ground, Xiong Fei's gaze naturally fell on the east side that was covered by the forbidden spell and casually asked. Forgive me for keeping you guessing. Dao Jing also said casually. However, as soon as he said that, everyone had a faint smile on their faces. Dao Jing immediately felt that it was inappropriate. He blushed slightly and smiled apologetically. This thing is related to the Feather Immortal Gathering. I can't let you see it for now. You'll know everything when the Feather Immortal Gathering starts. Could it be an ambush? Xiaohua thought to himself. Xiong Fei's expression also turned serious. He said vigilantly, your Taiqing sect. Could it be that you have other ideas? Dao Jing smiled bitterly and cupped his hands. Senior Xiong, please be careful with your words. All the famous sects in the three kingdoms are participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering. How could my Taiqing sect dare to do anything? I don't think you dare. Xiong Fei waved his hand. However, his gaze did not leave the restrictive spell. He had been using his divine thought to scan the restrictive spell. Unfortunately, the restrictive spell was very strong. No matter how Xiong Fei looked, he could not see what was inside. Of course, Xiaohua and the others were also curious. Are the same sects participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering? Wei Chongxi looked away from the restrictive spell and looked at the disciples in different clothes in the pavilion. He said softly, which sects are not here? Dao Jing smiled. Of course, it's still the same sections. Your country's Shanghua sect and Xuanyin sect, Lian country's Utopia sect, Xiantian sect, Kunlun sect and Nanming sect. My country's Changbai sect, Immortal Ascension sect and Xinla sect. My country's 3 sects are close. I'm afraid they will only be here tomorrow. As for the other sects, other than Lian country's Kunlun sect, Nanming sect and your country's Shanghua sect, all the other sects came yesterday. Then Dao Jing hesitated for a moment and said softly, also, I seem to have heard. There's another sect participating. However, I don't know which sect it is. There are other sects. Zhen Qing, Wei Chongxi and Xiong Fei looked at each other in surprise. It's not that I'm keeping you in suspense. I really don't know. Perhaps, we'll be able to see the results in the next 2 days. Dao Jing muttered. Haha, I've said so much. Actually, there are a total of 13 sections. Only the Xuanyin sect, the Utmost Happiness sect and the Shentian sect are present. Including the Imperial Thunder sect, the Qiqiao sect and the Huanhua sect, we don't even have half of them. Xiaohua glanced at Hong Xiaofei, who had a cold expression on her face. Xiaohua pondered in his heart, Utopia faction? I wonder which senior from the Utopia faction is here. It's a pity that Li Zongbao has only built his foundation a few years ago. No matter how much of a genius he is, it's impossible for him to enter the late stage of the foundation establishment realm. I'm afraid he won't be able to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly. Do they all live here too? Zhen Qing raised her eyebrows and asked, May I know who their masterminds are? I would like to pay them a visit. Alright, Senior Zhen, please know. The Xuanyin sect's Senior Jiang Changhong, the Xiantian sect's Senior Jing Haojing, and the Utmost Happiness faction's Senior Ku Huichou. Dao Jing thought for a while and said, However, Senior Ku from the Utmost Happiness faction went to visit a good friend at the Human Spiritual Peak yesterday and hasn't returned yet. Only their deputy Li Zongbao is here. If Senior Zhen wants to pay a visit to Senior Ku, I'll send a messaging charm to you. Zhen Qing smiled and waved her hand. There's no need. Although we know each other, there's no need to send a messaging charm. We'll go and have a look together later. Great. Hearing Dao Jing's words, Xiaohua was overjoyed. He didn't know how to pass on the message that Kai Zhuoxia had entrusted to him to Li Zongbao. Now that they were all here to participate in the Feather Immortal Conference, wasn't this the best opportunity? I'll tell Li Zongbao about this matter and I'll have a perfect explanation for Kai Zhuoxia. Sighed, beautiful women have short lives. Isn't this the case? Xiaohua looked at Fairy Hong Xia in the distance and couldn't help but think of Kai Zhuoxia's lifelike face lying in the green stone coffin. Seniors and fellow cultivators, according to the rules of the Feather Immortal Conference, the resting places of each faction are not in the same place. Moreover, each faction is separated by a spell array. Only people with their own magic tokens can enter and leave freely. The spell array of each faction doesn't prevent messaging charms. If you want to go to another faction, you can use your messaging charms. Only when the spell array is open can you enter freely. As Dao Jing spoke, he passed the magic tokens of each faction to the deputies of the 3 factions. In addition, when you're resting, please stay in this pavilion. It's best not to go too far from other places. Dao Jing thought for a while and said, The Bright Realm is the place where the disciples of the Taiqing sect cultivate. There are also places for training. They all rely on the power of magic treasures. Many places are not easy to control. If any of you want to go out and sightsee, you can ask the disciples of the Taiqing sect to lead the way. If you go out without permission and meet with any trouble, the Taiqing sect can't bear the responsibility. I know. Every year, the Feather Immortal Conference uses the same old method. Who doesn't know? Xiong Fei waved his hand and said, That's good. I'll return to the mountain to report. Seniors, please rest early. Tomorrow, at the E-Gathering, the Taiqing sect will send some foundation establishment and Qi refinement disciples over to exchange information with you. After Dao Jing finished speaking, he waved his hand and said to a few Qi refinement level 7 and 8 disciples who had flown over, Bring the seniors and senior brothers of each faction to rest. There's a E-Gathering tomorrow? Xiaohua was delighted when he heard that. He hadn't been to the E-Gathering for a long time and missed the time in Jinghua City. It seems that I have to refine more fireball charms tonight. Xiaohua thought to himself. However, just as this thought arose, Xiaohua scolded himself secretly. How stupid. Exchanging fireball charms with others and letting others use my own fireball charms to hit myself? The resting place of the Imperial Thunder sect was naturally different from the Huanhua sect. Xiaohua and Fairy Hong Xia went their separate ways, and Fairy Hong Xia didn't even look at Xiao Hua from the beginning to the end. The Imperial Thunder Sect was allocated a row of rather large pavilions. There were many rooms and each room had a restriction. One could only enter with the corresponding magic tablet. Xiao Hua held the magic tablet that Zhen Yu had given him and found his quiet room. Wang Yunxiao's quiet room was right next to Xiao Hua's. Seeing Xiao Hua open the restriction, Wang Yunxiao smiled and said, "That's good. I still have some cultivation insights that I want to share with junior brother Xiao. Can you come to my room later?" "I'm afraid I don't have time today. I still have other things to do. Let's wait for tomorrow." Xiao Hua shook his head and said. Wang Yunxiao was surprised and asked, "Isn't this junior brother Zhao's first time in the Taiqing sect?" Of course it's my first time in the Taiqing sect." Xiao Hua smiled and didn't answer Wang Yunxiao's question directly. He stepped into the quiet room and opened the restriction casually. Seeing Xiao Hua walk into the quiet room, Wang Yunxiao narrowed his eyes and stared at the door of the quiet room thoughtfully for a moment. Then he also entered his quiet room. However, Wang Yunxiao didn't close the door of his quiet room, nor did he open the restriction. After the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, Xiao Hua came out of his quiet room. He glanced at Wang Yunxiao's quiet room and stepped out of the row of pavilions where the Imperial Thunder Sect was located. Naturally, there were qi refining disciples of the Taiqing sect in front of the pavilions. Xiao Hua asked for the location of the pavilion where the Utopia faction was located and went without saying. After Xiao Hua's figure disappeared, Wang Yunxiao also came out of the pavilion. He cupped his hands and smiled at the disciple who was on duty. "Where did my junior brother go just now? The deputy leader of my sect has something to ask him." That disciple was only at level 6 of the qi refining stage. He didn't dare to ignore Wang Yunxiao's question. He bowed respectfully and said, "Just now my senior brother asked about the location of the Utopia faction. It seems that he is also going to the Utopia faction. Senior brother, you can send a message to him. If it is inconvenient for you, I can help you find him." Forget it. I'm afraid he is going to look for an acquaintance of the Utopia faction. Let's wait for him to come back." Wang Yunxiao waved his hand and turned back. In his heart he muttered to himself, "Xiao Hua, this guy. When did he in the Utopia faction? Oh, he can't be a spy of the Utopia faction, right?" However, Wang Yunxiao shook his head immediately. If he is really a spy of the Utopia faction, there is no reason for him to be so careless. How could he swagger around to look for people? Maybe. Wang Yunxiao's face showed a trace of a rare hideous smile. Some people just think that they are clever. They think that swaggering around will not be suspected. Well, Xiao Hua is a disbanded cultivator. If he didn't have a great opportunity, how could he reach level 10 of the qi refining stage? This guy must have some secret on him. This secret must be related to the Utopia faction. After thinking about it, Wang Yunxiao could no longer sit still. He quickly walked out of the quiet room and chased after Xiao Hua in the direction that he had just gone. Xiao Hua asked the disciple on duty of the Taiqing sect and found the pavilion assigned by the Utopia faction very easily. Just as Dao Jing said, he couldn't enter the pavilion when he was about 3 feet in front of it. In front of the pavilion, there was also a disciple on duty of the Taiqing sect. When he saw Xiao Hua trying to enter, he walked over and said with his hands folded, "Senior brother, you can send a message or message in. If it is inconvenient, I can help you report it. May I know which senior brother of the Utopia faction you are looking for?" After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua said with his hands folded, "I am Xiao Hua, a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Please report to Senior Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction that I have something important to tell him." "Oh, you are looking for Senior Li. Senior brother Xiao, please wait a moment." The disciple on duty turned around and went in. Not long after, Li Zongbao followed the disciple out of the pavilion with a surprised look on his face. When Li Zongbao saw Xiao Hua, his face was even more incredulous. He looked up and down, left and right, up and down, and said curiously, "You are." Then he glanced at the disciple of the Taiqing sect and said vaguely, "Are you the Xiao Hua from before?" Xiao Hua bowed and said, "I am Xiao Hua. Greetings, Senior Li." Chapter 1603. Your cultivation level. Li Zongbao pointed at Xiao Hua and asked in disbelief. Xiao Hua waved his hand and took out the summoning glyph Li Zongbao gave him. He handed it over and said with a smile, "This is the summoning glyph Senior gave me that day. Senior, please take a look and see if it's real." Li Zongbao didn't take it and scanned it with his divine sense. He slowly nodded and said, this summoning glyph is real. I also recognize your face, but, Senior, can you come in for a chat? Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, Junior has something very important to report to you. Li Zongbao nodded and opened the restriction with a magic tablet to let Xiaohua in. Xiaohua followed Li Zongbao into the quiet room. Xiaohua, what happened to your cultivation level? How did you become a disciple of Imperial Thunder Sect? Li Zongbao had seen Xiaohua when he was in the first layer of qi refining, so he didn't believe that Xiaohua only cultivated from the first layer of qi refining to the 12th layer of qi refining in a few years. Junior was originally in the 10th layer of qi refining, but because of some things, my cultivation level was completely lost and I was seriously injured. Fortunately, Senior Xiao Huaming and Senior Xiao Yu saved Junior, so Junior temporarily took over Xiao Huaming's body. As for the specific details, forgive Junior for not being able to tell you the truth. Xiao Hua explained in a low voice. Li Zongbao didn't know that Xiao Hua didn't have any details to report, so he frowned slightly and said, I don't care about those details. Which cultivation sect are you from? Junior was a loose cultivator before, but now I've passed the disciple selection of Imperial Thunder Sect and officially entered the sect. Xiao Hua said. A loose cultivator in the 10th layer of qi refining? Li Zongbao's eyes narrowed. His sharp gaze was like two swords piercing Xiao Hua's body, as if he wanted to see everything about Xiao Hua. This is bad. Xiao Hua knew it was bad. He was a loose cultivator in the 10th layer of qi refining, how could he be so young? Moreover, he was always with Kai Zhuoxia, how could Li Zongbao not be suspicious? However, Xiao Hua was also helpless. A loose cultivator in the 10th layer of qi refining recovering his cultivation in a few years was more reliable than a loose cultivator in the first layer of qi refining cultivating to the 12th layer of qi refining in a few years, right? Xiao Hua had to continue making this lie. Fortunately, a loose cultivator in the 10th layer of qi refining in the 10th layer of qi refining in the 10th layer of qi refining was around 20, and there weren't many people who knew Zhao's details' background. Seeing that Xiao Hua's eyes didn't even blink as he responded to him, Li Zongbao continued to ask, what about Kai Zhuoxia? Where is she now? Liang's? Xiao Hua sighed with a gloomy expression. With a wave of his hand, he took out the silk pouch Kai Zhuoxia gave him and handed it over. He said sorrowfully, fellow Taoist Kai asked Junior to give this to you. Hearing this, Li Zongbao's heart skipped a beat. He already had a premonition. With a wave of his hand, the silk bag flew out from Xiao Hua's hand, but he didn't even look at it. He suddenly released his pressure, firmly suppressing Xiao Hua. He coldly said, tell me what happened to Kai Zhuoxia? His teeth, clack. Seniors. S. His tes. S's. Was he's. Senior. Huh? How is that possible? When Li Zongbao heard this grievous news, his face turned ferocious. His eyes were bloodshot. The mings increased. Senior. Withdraw your mings. Junior will tell the truth. Xiao Hua didn't get angry when he saw Li Zongbao's grief. Instead, he sympathized with Li Zongbao. You. Li Zongbao stared at Xiao Hua like a wild beast, causing goosebumps to appear on Xiao Hua's back. After a long while, Li Zongbao withdrew more than half of his pressure, but still left some on Xiao Hua's body to prevent Xiao Hua from doing anything else. Li Zongbao sat cross-legged on the ground and said coldly, tell me. Xiao Hua also slowly sat down and slowly said, yes, Junior came today to clearly explain the matter to Senior so that I can complete fellow Kai's request. After that, Xiao Hua recounted what had happened in the Flaming Forest Swamp, just like what he had told the Kai family of Luyang. On the other side, Li Zongbao's expression changed drastically, especially when he heard Kai Zhuoxia call out his name before she died. When she put the black hair into the silk pouch for him, he unconsciously opened the silk pouch. When he saw the black hair, he really thought of her and couldn't help but shed tears. The pressure that was suppressing Xiao Hua had long been withdrawn completely. After Xiao Hua finished speaking, the entire quiet room was deathly still. Neither of them wanted to say a single word. Li Zongbao's eyes were firmly fixed on the silk bag in his hand, as if he could see Kai Zhuoxia, unwilling to leave even half an inch. After an unknown amount of time, Li Zongbao said in a low voice, Xiao Hua, is what you said true? Xiao Hua froze and hurriedly said, how can Junior dare to deceive Senior? Kai Daoyou's corpse was in the manor of the Kai family in Luyang. Oh, Kai Zhuoxia's younger sister, Fairy Hong Xia, has already joined the Huanhua sect. She is currently in the Bright Realm. If Senior doesn't believe me, you can ask her face to face. It's just that, this disciple didn't tell them about Senior's matter. And I believe you. Li Zongbao said slowly, word by word, how can I not believe a person who can send the last good fate tablet of the Huanhua sect back to the Kai family according to Zhuoxiao's wishes? Xiaohua didn't feel any joy in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, many thanks for Senior's trust. Alright, you can go now. Li Zongbao waved his hand as if he had aged a few years. And Zhuoxia owe you a huge favor. You and Kai Zhuoxia? Xiaohua's heart ached as he thought to himself in amazement. However, he didn't dare to stay for long. He stood up and said, Junior will return now. Junior will definitely not reveal the matter of Junior coming here, and Senior's matter. Go, Li Zongbao sighed and waved his hand. After Xiaohua left, Li Zongbao's trembling hand held the silk bag. His eyelids trembled slightly, and scalding hot tears unconsciously flowed down. After an unknown period of time, Li Zongbao's figure didn't change. However, his hair gradually turned white, then white and finally snow white. Li Zongbao's eyes changed from pain to determination, and finally to indifference. When Li Zongbao's eyes became indifferent, his figure changed slightly. His hands formed a strange spell and he placed them in front of his chest. His true core strength started to flow around his body. Along with the flow of his true core strength, Li Zongbao's body produced a huge suction force. It was like a black hole, sucking in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth both inside and outside the quiet room. The hurricane created by the flow of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth caused the restrictive spell in the quiet room to flicker. The movement in Li Zongbao's quiet room naturally attracted the attention of the Utmost Happiness faction's disciples. They didn't dare to neglect it and immediately notified the Taiqing sect's disciples who were on duty. They asked them to inform Xie Hui and the disciples on duty to release the restrictive spell in the pavilion so that more spiritual qi of heaven and earth could enter. The sky was getting brighter. Outside Li Zongbao's quiet room, more than 10 disciples were guarding it. Xie Hui also rushed back and looked at the restrictive spell in the quiet room nervously. He didn't dare to release his soul strength rashly. Inside the quiet room, Li Zongbao's hair was all white, and his face showed the usual indifference. Suddenly, Li Zongbao's face flushed red. Then Li Zongbao opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of bright red blood. It landed on the silk bag that Li Zongbao had placed on the ground. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Li Zongbao's eyes moved slightly. He released the strange spell in his hands, and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth that was violently sucked into his body stopped abruptly. Li Zongbao stood up and slowly opened his eyes. His pitch-black eyes gradually showed a trace of indifference. He raised his head and looked at the silk bag that was stained with blood. He raised his hand and a wisp of flame appeared and fell on the silk bag. With a light bang, the silk bag was ignited and turned into ashes in a short while. Li Zongbao's eyes reflected the flame that was ignited by the silk bag. As the flame was extinguished, his eyes lost some of their emotions and became even more indifferent. Looking at the restrictive spells around the quiet room, Li Zongbao waved his hand. With a flash of light, the restrictive spells were closed. Outside the quiet room, Xie Hui was about to release his divine thought when the door opened. When the apprentices of the Utopia faction saw Li Zongbao's appearance, they couldn't help but be surprised. Even Xie Hui took a step forward and said in a low voice, Zongbao, what's going on? Li Zongbao said calmly, Uncle, don't worry. Yesterday an old friend of mine came to visit me. After he left, I felt that my understanding of the parting mirror had deepened. So, I took the opportunity to perform secluded meditation for a while. Last night's movement and my changes are all signs of my cultivation progress. Uncle, you've thoroughly understood the parting mirror? Xie Hui was delighted to hear that. Li Zongbao still said calmly, I don't dare to say that I've comprehended it. I just felt more about it than before. Haha, congratulations. It seems that I was right to ask you to come to the Feather Celestial Conference. Xie Hui said with a smile, although your cultivation hasn't reached the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, with the understanding of the parting mirror, you can easily reach the foundation establishment stage. Congratulations, Senior Li. The apprentices of the Utopia faction were also happy to hear that. They all bowed to him. Forget it. Congratulations to you too. Li Zongbao waved his hand. There was no joy on his face. He looked at the sky outside and said, Today is the day of the exchange meeting of the Feather Celestial Conference. You can go and find what you need. I want to meditate, cultivate, and consolidate my cultivation stage. Okay, you can go and wait. I will stay here to protect him. Xie Hui said with a smile and waved his hand. Yes, we will do as you say. The apprentices bowed and left the pavilion of the Utopia faction in twos and threes. At this time, the sun was shining brightly outside the pavilion. Many apprentices were sitting on the ground with their legs crossed. In front of them were some things. The exchange meeting of the Feather Celestial Conference had begun. Chapter 1604. Xiaohua left Li Zongbao's quiet room and saw a flash of light at the door. The restriction was reactivated, and his heart ached for no reason. If the heavens have feelings, the heavens will grow old. If the moon doesn't hate, the moon will be round. What can I do? Xiaohua sighed and left. The Taiching sect disciple on duty didn't stop him and only smiled and sent him off. Xiaohua's mind was in a mess. He didn't notice that in a dark place not far away, Wang Yunxiao was looking at his back with bright eyes, thinking about something. Xiaohua returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect's pavilion and opened the restriction of the quiet room. He was stunned. Inside the room, a crimson communication talisman was floating in the air. Could it be Fairy Hongxia? Xiaohua thought, and a trace of ecstasy appeared in his heart. Unfortunately, when he crushed the communication talisman, Sun Shu's voice came from inside. Junior brother Xiao, if you have time, can you come to Ai's quiet room for a chat? Sun Shu, what's the matter? Xiaohua thought for a moment, then turned and walked out of the quiet room. Sun Shu's quiet room was not far from Xiaohua's, and there was no restriction outside the quiet room. Hearing footsteps stop in front of his door, Sun Shu swept with his divine sense and got up to open the door. Junior brother Xiao, please come in. And Xiaohua nodded slightly and walked into the room. Seeing Sun Shu activate the quiet room's restriction, he frowned. Sun Shu naturally noticed Xiaohua's expression and said in a low voice, I have some things to discuss with fellow Taoist, so I had to do this. Good. Xiaohua looked around, then sat cross-legged on the ground and said in a deep voice, then I am all ears. If it was a normal day, Xiaohua would definitely have a smile on his face and chat with the delicate and pretty senior sister Sun Shu. Unfortunately, his mood was driven away by Fairy Hongxia's indifference. Moreover, he just saw the sadness of Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuoxiao. How could he still have the mood to chat with Sun Shu? His tone became much fainter. Sun Shu was sensitive and had long noticed it. He said with an apologetic expression, I know that junior brother Xiao painstakingly cultivates and doesn't waste any time. I'm really sorry for inviting junior brother Xiao over. It's fine. Xiaohua reluctantly squeezed out a trace of a smile and said, Ai's mood is a bit bad. I hope that senior sister Sun will forgive me. People have their joys and sorrows, and the moon waxes and wanes. How can there be anything perfect in this world? It's normal for junior brother Xiao to have troubles. Sun Shu sighed and said, it's just that we're all cultivators. We shouldn't let our emotions affect our decisions. Junior brother Xiao, you're a loose cultivator, so I'm sure you have a deeper understanding of this. Perhaps. Xiaohua didn't understand why Sun Shu was so sentimental and casually waved his hand. Junior brother Xiao, I haven't thanked you for saving my life. Today I finally know how to thank you. Please forgive me. Finished speaking, Sun Shu stood in front of Xiaohua and bowed gracefully. Xiaohua immediately jumped up from the ground, stretched out his hand to support Sun Shu's arm and called out, What are you doing? Senior sister Sun, you've killed this little brother. How could Sun Shu be willing to comply? She still had to bow down, but unfortunately, how could her strength compare to Xiaohua's? Xiaohua's arm seemed to be cast from copper and iron, and it didn't budge in the slightest. Sun Shu couldn't help but muster her magic power, wanting to move Xiaohua's arm away. Who would have thought that even if she mustered 50% of her magic power, Xiaohua's arm still wouldn't budge? Sun Shu was a bit stunned. She knew the difference between the peak of qi refining stage and the early stage of qi refining stage. Sun Shu's beautiful eyes turned and she bitterly smiled and said, Since junior brother Xiao doesn't want I to thank you, then I can only take it back. Don't, senior sister Sun. You also know that Ai's movement technique is very fast. Under the attack of the flying leopard, I might not necessarily be in trouble. That's why I dared to help. I don't deserve such a heavy reward. I reckon that the others also have the same idea. If they had the ability, they would have definitely helped. Xiaohua calmly said as he withdrew his hand. Sun Shu sighed and casually sat down. She bitterly smiled and said, Having the ability is one thing, but whether or not they can help is another. From Ai's point of view, they... Sun Shu waved her hand as if she was shooing away a fly. Don't say any more. Saying these things will only hurt I. Xiaohua slightly nodded and didn't say anything. After a while, Sun Shu opened her mouth again and said, "Actually, I invited junior brother Xiao over to discuss something with him." "Please speak, senior sister." "However, before I say it, I want to confirm something with junior brother Xiao." "What is it?" Xiaohua didn't understand. "Junior brother Xiao has already learned the lightning escape technique?" Sun Shu probed. What does it have to do with it?" Xiaohua asked back. Sun Shu saw that Xiaohua didn't deny it and sighed in relief. She smiled and said, "Actually, when junior brother Xiao saved I that day, I already faintly felt that this was the case. However, to be on the safe side, I still have to ask." Seeing that Sun Shu had explained, Xiaohua couldn't deny it anymore and slightly nodded. "That's good." A trace of a smile flashed on Sun Shu's face and she asked, "I wonder if fellow Taoist Xiao wants to cultivate the lightning escape technique to the 4th level?" "What do you mean?" Xiaohua was stunned and said curiously, "I naturally want to cultivate the lightning escape technique. Not just the 4th level, even if it's the 9th level, I also want to cultivate it." Her. Hearing Xiaohua's answer, Sun Shu covered her mouth and said with a smile, "Junior brother Xiao, was this lightning escape technique taught by your master?" "What? Does senior sister feel that it isn't?" "Of course not." Sun Shu explained, "If your master had no choice but to teach it, I believe that junior brother Xiao wouldn't answer like this right now." "Why is that? Could it be that this lightning escape technique still has something fishy?" Xiaohua was even more surprised. Sun Shu also did not ask where Xiaohua learned this lightning escape technique from. She only said, "I wonder how many levels of the lightning escape technique junior brother Xiao has seen before?" "Senior sister Sun, if you have something to say, just say it directly. Always asking like this makes people very uncomfortable." Xiaohua turned his head and said, "Alright, then I will get straight to the point." Sun Shu said with a smile, "I believe that junior brother Xiao has only seen the 1st level of the lightning escape technique. Actually, although my Imperial Thunder Sect's lightning escape technique is called an escape technique, it is actually a cultivation technique, which is the legendary lightning cultivator." "Lightning cultivator?" Xiaohua slightly frowned. He had never heard of this lightning cultivator. Sun Shu also did not explain and continued to say, "It's just that because the cultivation technique is incomplete, this cultivation technique cannot be cultivated, and could only be modified into an escape technique. Compared to the previous lightning cultivator technique, the lightning escape technique can only be considered an insignificant Dao. Moreover, even so, this lightning escape technique is extremely different from the 5 elements escape technique. I believe that junior brother Xiao also knows that the lightning escape technique is divided into 9 levels, but you definitely don't know that this lightning escape technique is divided into 3 grades. 3 grades? Xiaohua was stunned. He seemed to have never seen this in the lightning escape technique before. I hope senior sister can enlighten me. This 3rd grade lightning escape technique is only known by the direct disciples of my Imperial Thunder Sect, and it is only limited by word of mouth. Even your master, maybe he only knows half of it. Sun Shu said with a smile, and Shui, in the future she will definitely not know. Therefore, I asked junior brother Xiao to swear that this matter absolutely cannot be told to anyone else. Xiaohua understood. This 3rd grade lightning escape technique was already something that Sun Shu wanted to say in the future. It was probably her repayment for saving her life. Thinking for a moment, Xiaohua nodded in agreement and made a heart oath. Thus, Sun Shu continued, the 3 grades of the lightning evasion are divided into high, middle, and low grades, respectively corresponding to the 9 levels of the lightning evasion. Among them, hibernating lightning, shocking lightning, and bright lightning are low-grade lightning evasion. Imperial lightning travel, imperial lightning change, and imperial lightning shock are middle-grade lightning evasion. Lightning travel 3 realms, lightning surpass 6 paths, and thunderclap 9th heaven are high-grade lightning evasion. And what's so strange about this? Xiaohua secretly said, isn't it just the early, middle, and late stages? Actually, the low-grade lightning escape technique also has a name called lightning tranquility, middle-grade lightning escape technique is called lightning movement, and high-grade lightning escape technique is called lightning ascension. Sun Shu continued to say, the reason why there are these names is because there is an insurmountable gap between the 3rd grade lightning escape technique. There must be some opportunity to have the opportunity to enter the later stages. This opportunity is not just limited to cultivation. Looking at Xiao Hua's unmoved expression, Sun Shu said again, "In my Imperial Thunder sect, there are countless disciples who cultivate the lightning escape technique. However, the vast majority of people stop at lightning tranquility. Very few disciples can break through to lightning movement. Even the current sect master is only at the second level of lightning movement." What? Sect master? Just cultivated to Imperial Thunder change? Hearing this news, Xiao Hua couldn't help but be shocked. That's right, it's exactly so. Moreover, not only that, my Imperial Thunder sect's reclusive elders and martial ancestors, it is said that at most they have only reached shocking thunder change. Is it that difficult? Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. Hehe, if it wasn't so difficult, why can everyone cultivate my Imperial Thunder sect's lightning escape technique? Sun Shu said with a smile, as long as you have a lightning attribute physique, you can comprehend my Lightning Palace's lightning escape technique when you reach Foundation establishment. No one will stop you because the elders in the sect know that it is basically impossible for them to break through to lightning tranquility. I wonder what realm martial ancestor Sun Ming is at? Xiao Hua suddenly asked. My master has already reached lightning tranquility's third level. Sun Shu said with a smile. Bright lightning escape? Precisely. Xiao Hua's expression was thought-provoking. He said with a smile, since martial ancestor Sun Ming with his Aurus core stage cultivation can't break through to lightning movement, does senior sister Sun think that I can break through with my current cultivation? Sun Shu knew that Xiao Hua would ask this question and said with confidence, if junior brother Xiao does as I say, perhaps there is a 30% chance. If you don't do it, I'm afraid there is only a 10% chance. Sun Shu then added, this humble Taoist saw that junior brother Xiao was able to comprehend the hibernating thunder escape technique at the late stage of qi refinement and has talent in the thunder escape technique. This humble Taoist wanted to work with junior brother Xiao because of that. Otherwise, even if junior brother Xiao saved this humble Taoist's life, this humble Taoist would only repay him in other ways. Chapter 1605. Cooperation? When Xiao Hua heard this, he couldn't help but have a headache. He had cooperated with Kai Zhuoxiao before. Although he had also gained something, the price was also obvious. Senior Sun. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, Senior Sun must know that I was originally a loose cultivator. I ran wild outside and didn't have time to cultivate. Now that I was able to enter the Imperial Thunder sect with great difficulty, I have techniques, pills, and the guidance of Master and Senior Sun, I really cherish the opportunity to cultivate now. Therefore, I'm not very interested in traveling and so on. I just want to cultivate quietly. Oh, I understand. Sun Shu didn't expect that the secret of the lightning escape technique couldn't move Xiao Hua. Clearly, she had underestimated Xiao Hua's hardships as a loose cultivator. However, since Junior Sun doesn't want to travel, why? Did you participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly? Sun Shu rolled her eyes and said with a smile. Is the Feather Immortal Assembly the same as traveling? Xiao Hua asked back. I see. Sun Shu understood. She pursed her lips and said with a smile, it seems that Junior Sun doesn't know the origin of the Feather Immortal Assembly. Moreover, no wonder, when you saw I during the selection you immediately admitted defeat. Junior Sun probably didn't plan to come to the Taiching sect at all, right? Indeed. Xiao Hua said helplessly, I came here by coincidence. However, Sun Shu's face changed and she said solemnly, since Junior Sun didn't plan to come, then, don't come. Since you're here, then you must be alert and protect your life. What? Protect my life? Xiao Hua was stunned and stuttered, I thought that it would be over after one round. The Myriad Thunder Valley hasn't had a disciple participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly for many years. Our Imperial Thunder sect always exaggerates the function of the Feather Immortal Assembly and never mentions the casualties. Yes, even if there are casualties, it's to win glory for our Imperial Thunder sect. After a long time, who would remember that the Feather Immortal Assembly was originally a method for cultivation countries to compete for resources? Sun Shu said coldly, even now, the Feather Immortal Assembly is a kind of experience for the late qi refinement disciples of various sects to enter the foundation establishment stage. Since it's an experience, there should be a price. If there was no danger, if there was no risk of death, how could a late-stage aura refining disciple break through? What was the difference between this and the foundation establishment training once every 5 years? Of course, the Feather Immortal Gathering is different from the foundation establishment training that occurs once every 5 years. In the Feather Immortal Gathering, if your cultivation is sufficient and you're able to obtain a good ranking, then you'll be able to obtain the rewards of the Feather Immortal Gathering. The rewards may be a high-grade Foundation Establishment cultivation technique, a pill that can increase your chances of reaching Foundation Establishment, a powerful magic artifact, or even a magic treasure. Stay. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and said, Senior Sister Sun, what's the Foundation Establishment experiential learning that happens once every 5 years? Junior brother Xiao doesn't know? Sun Shu was surprised and laughed. Even if Master and Senior Martial Brother didn't mention it, the disciples of Gen Lei Palace would talk about it. Every time we train, there will be earth-shattering stories, and they are all topics that the disciples talk about in their free time. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Ever since he entered the Imperial Thunder sect, he had always been in the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden, cultivating behind closed doors. He didn't pay attention to the outside world, so how could he know about this? Master Wu Xian was a little impatient and wanted him to reach Foundation Establishment. He had more than enough motivation but didn't exert himself. As for Senior Martial Brother Xiang Yang, he was the kind of person who would answer every question you asked about a cultivation technique and answer every question you asked about general knowledge. With such a Master and Senior Martial Brother, how could Xiao Hua know about this? Perhaps Wu Xian was also bewitched by the masters of the Imperial Thunder sect. He had long forgotten that the Feather Immortal Gathering was a 12th layer aura refining training to break through the barrier and step into Foundation Establishment. He only knew that it was a matter of gaining face for Gen Lei Palace and Myriad Thunder Valley, right? I'm a loose cultivator. It's not easy for me to find a stable place to cultivate, and I've always been in the Eastern Ridge. I even rarely go to Gen Lei Palace. Xiao Hua muttered. Sun Shu was close to Shui, so she knew what Xiao Hua said was right. She nodded and said, cultivating peacefully can certainly improve your cultivation, but if you reach a bottleneck and can't improve, you can only go out to gain experience. When you reach the late stage of the 12th layer aura refining, the disciples of the Thunder Palace have to go out to gain experience once every 5 years. They hope to find a chance to break through the bottleneck and step into Foundation Establishment. So it's like that. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. He had heard Xiang Yang talk about Foundation Establishment before, so he thought that Foundation Establishment was about the same as his cultivation of aura refining. He only needed to cultivate quietly. Now that he thought about it again, during the Feather Immortal Gathering's qualification selection, he had only gone through several hundred battles. Not only was he proficient in magic arts, but his magic power had also increased. It seemed that this kind of experience was also necessary. Sun Shu looked at Xiao Hua's expression and said, since fellow Xiao will go out to gain experience in the future, why don't you consider cooperating with I? This. Xiao Hua was a little tongue-tied. He touched his chin and thought for a while, then said with a smile, Senior Martial Sister Sun, don't you think that you can reach Foundation Establishment after passing the Feather Immortal Gathering this time? Sun Shu heard this and sighed. She smiled bitterly and said, I think about it even in my dreams. But, is it that easy to reach Foundation Establishment? Although I've heard that some disciples were able to reach Foundation Establishment when participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering, those are all legends. I don't dare to have extravagant hopes. Moreover, it's not just I. Apart from the disciples of the Heaven and Earth Thunder Palaces who may have some hope, the other 10 disciples are definitely impossible. Senior Martial Sister's words are a little too full. People like Wang Yunxiao, Minggu, and Yuan Bo all entered the Imperial Thunder sect at the same time as I. They improved very quickly and stepped into the late stage of the 12th layer of aura refining in just a few years. If you say that they can't reach Foundation Establishment, I will be the first to not believe it. Junior Martial Brother Zhao's words are wrong. Sun Shu shook her head and said, Foundation Establishment isn't about who cultivates faster, but who cultivates to perfection. Moreover, apart from these, the most important thing is opportunity. Putting aside opportunity, Shui also told I about these people that fellow Taoist Xiao mentioned. According to I's observations, it's precisely because these people cultivated too quickly after entering the Imperial Thunder sect that they became obstacles to their own Foundation Establishment. Not to mention that it's impossible to reach Foundation Establishment this time, even after 5 years. They may not be able to reach Foundation Establishment. Looking at Sun Shu's extremely certain tone, Xiao Hua was stunned. Senior Martial Sister, aren't you too arbitrary? Hee. Sun Shu chuckled and said, this is what Master said. I was just saying. Grandmaster Sun Ming seems to tell Senior Martial Sister everything? Xiao Hua said thoughtfully. This. Sun Shu's eyes turned a few times and she said with a smile, Master and I are somewhat related by blood. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. If there wasn't this relationship, how could Sun Shu know so much? How about it? Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, I said so much. What do you think? Sun Shu said with a smile. Xiao Hua stroked his chin and slowly nodded. I know that this matter is related to Senior Marshal Sister's cultivation plan, so I won't ask too much. When Senior Marshal Sister feels that the time is right, if I happen to be going through Foundation Establishment experiential training, then how about I go with Senior Marshal Sister? Great. Sun Shu clapped her hands and said, In that case, let's clap our hands and make an oath. When the time is right, I'll inform you. Xiao Hua nodded. Thereupon, the two clapped their hands and made an oath. Soon after, Xiao Hua got up. Just as he was about to leave, he inadvertently asked, Senior Marshal Sister, why is there still a trade fair tomorrow? It's nothing more than an exchange of things. Who would exchange things that are truly useful here? I'm afraid that what we'll see tomorrow will be some ordinary or strange things that other people can't understand. Sun Shu laughed. Though she said it carelessly, the listener did. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. There were still a dozen or so gold leaves that he hadn't found in the exquisite derivation pagoda. Maybe there would be some pleasant surprise tomorrow. Actually, after Sun Shu finished speaking, she looked like she wanted to say something but hesitated. Forget it, let's not talk about it. I've already said too much to Junior Marshal Brother Xiao today. If I had said it earlier, I would have been as annoying as my master. Then Senior Marshal Sister will talk about it later. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and left the quiet room. The night was silent. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly. The disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect and the other sects had already packed up their things and came to the plaza. Today's plaza was different from yesterday. The flat ground was divided into many squares. Each square was about 4 feet in radius, just enough for a cultivator to sit inside. When Xiao Hua stepped into the plaza, there were already many Taiching sect disciples sitting cross-legged. In front of them were some medicinal pills, jade slips and other things. In addition to the squares occupied by the Taiching sect disciples, there were many empty squares on the flat ground. Some of the disciples of the other sects found a square and sat down. They put their things in front of them and waited for others to ask about the price. As the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect and the other sects entered, the plaza gradually became lively. Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry. He just squinted his eyes and looked around. After looking for a moment, Xiao Hua gradually understood that it was just as Sun Shu said. There weren't any medicinal pills that were useful to Qi refinement stage disciples. Even the jade slips only recorded superficial Qi refinement stage cultivation methods. On the contrary, there were many strange little things. Some were strange in shape, and some had obscure spiritual power fluctuations. In short, they were mostly things that no one could afford to pick up. What is this? Xiao Hua was walking when he saw something similar to a necklace in a square not far away. This thing was iron gray in color. It was mottled with rust. It was really inconspicuous. Even the slight spiritual power fluctuations were intermittent. Xiao Hua didn't know the origin of this thing. It was just that when he looked at it, his first impression was that it had some origin. Xiao Hua took a few steps forward, wanting to take the necklace. However, when he was a few steps away from the necklace, an early-stage Foundation Establishment Taiching sect disciple stepped in front of Xiao Hua and picked up the necklace. He calmly transmitted his voice, "Fellow Taoist, do you want to exchange this for spirit stones or something else?" That disciple was from the Seven Skills sect. When he saw someone pick up the necklace, his face lit up with joy. He cupped his hands and sent a voice transmission to the early-stage Foundation Establishment Taiching sect disciple about what he wanted to exchange for. Chapter 1606. After that, the disciple of the Taiching sect also started to bargain. After a while, the disciple of the Taiching sect took out a storage bag and handed it to the disciple of the Qiqiao sect. The disciple of the Qiqiao sect opened it and looked at it. Then he was delighted. He put away the storage bag and cupped his hands. "Thank you for your help, Senior. Please keep it well." The disciple of the Taiching sect nodded slightly and put the necklace into the storage bag. Sound transmission? That's a good idea. Xiao Hua, who was standing not far away, regretted that he was late. At the same time, he was lost in thought because he couldn't hear their conversation. Sound transmission was the basic spell of the Imperial Thunder sect. Under Xiang Yang's guidance, Xiaohua had mastered it a long time ago. However, he never thought that he would use it in such an occasion. When Xiaohua looked at the disciples who were exchanging items, he found that they were all using sound transmission. Moreover, they put everything in their storage bags and didn't take it out. Wonderful. Xiaohua applauded in his heart. At the same time, he dispelled the regret of not getting the magic weapon in advance. Then Xiaohua walked forward again. However, at this moment he heard some noises behind him. When he looked back, he saw 3 disciples of the Taiching sect outside the square. They led 3 groups of disciples in different outfits and flew toward him. The disciples of the Taiching sect whispered, "Humph, the Changbai sect, the Immortal Ascension School and the Immortal Music sect are finally here. I thought that they would only come tomorrow when the Feather Immortal Assembly officially begins. Yes, I heard from my master that in the past, the cultivators of our country would arrive one day before the Feather Immortal Assembly. On one hand they show respect to the host sect. On the other hand they welcome the other sects from afar like the host sect." Xiaohua was amused. Yesterday, Sun Shu had said that the Feather Immortal Assembly was a trial for the disciples at the peak of the 12th level of the Qi refining realm. The disciples of each sect would fight for their lives. Who would want to come first? In Xiaohua's opinion, it was good enough that they could come. Ming country's 3 cultivation sects had around 60 people. They were also led to their own pavilions to rest. After Xiaohua walked around the square for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, these disciples also came out one after another. In the lattice there were many new things that were taken out. Xiaohua looked at it for a long time, but still didn't gain anything. He saw a flat wine jug. According to the disciple who sold it, it was a spatial magic treasure, but without the method to refine it, it couldn't be used completely. That disciple wanted to use it to exchange for a water-based foundation establishment cultivation method. But through Xiaohua's spiritual sense, he didn't see anything special about this wine jug. He even felt that it was a very simple magic tool similar to a storage pouch. Although there were quite a few disciples surrounding them, Xiaohua only listened for a moment before walking away. What was that? It seems to be similar to the soul-absorbing bell. He walked up to a Mongolian disciple who had just arrived and saw a broken bell. That Mongolian disciple was a young female cultivator. This cultivator's skin was extremely white, especially her 2 eyebrows, which were faint like 2 clouds. Xiaohua looked at the side and saw that there were no other disciples interested in this thing. He slowly walked in front of that female cultivator and cupped his hands. "I am Imperial Thunder Sect Xiaohua. Greetings, Senior. Sister." When that female cultivator saw Xiaohua greet her and transmit his voice, she almost laughed out loud. Soon after she transmitted her voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao is interesting. We are just bartering, why do we need to introduce ourselves?" Xiaohua's face was slightly red. Just as he was about to explain, that female cultivator transmitted her voice again. "I am Immortal Music Sect's Zhong Xiaohan. I am very happy to meet fellow Taoist Xiao." Then she pointed her finger and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, are you interested in eyes things?" "Exactly. I don't know if fellow Taoist thing is the soul-absorbing bell." This thing is called the soul-absorbing bell, but it is not the soul-absorbing bell that fellow Taoist spoke of." "Oh, so it's like that." Xiaohua was somewhat disappointed. He thought for a moment and asked, "I don't know if fellow Taoist Zhong has the method to use this soul-absorbing bell?" Zhong Xiaohan stared at Xiaohua for a moment, seemingly thinking. Then she asked, "I only wanted to use this soul-absorbing bell to exchange for some spirit stones. As for the method to use it, if I gave it to fellow Taoist Xiao, wouldn't fellow Taoist Xiao know the origin of this soul-absorbing bell?" Xiaohua slightly nodded. Zhong Xiaohan's words were very reasonable. The method to use it must have the origin of this soul-absorbing bell. Looking at Zhong Xiaohan's meaning, this thing was most likely related to the state of Shi. When he thought of the state of Shi, Xiaohua naturally thought of the Qing clan. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhong, wouldn't it be fine if you erased the origin of the jade slip?" Unfortunately, the cultivation method was not written in the jade slip. Zhong Xiaohan smiled. Xiaohua was helpless. He cupped his hands and said, "It seems that I have no fate with this thing." "Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't worry." Zhong Xiaohan said again, "There is nothing in this world that can't be exchanged. It just depends on whether you are willing to pay the price." "Great." Xiaohua clapped and said, "What does fellow Taoist Zhong want? What does fellow Taoist Xiao have?" "Do you think it can be matched with Ai's soul-absorbing bell?" Zhong Xiaohan asked back. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Zhong just said that you want to exchange for spirit stones. It seems that spirit stones are not possible. Medicinal pills? I don't have any. If fellow Taoist Zhong wants any spirit herbs, I do have some here." "You don't have any refining materials?" Zhong Xiaohan frowned and asked. "Refining materials?" Xiaohua shook his head. Zhong Xiaohan said regretfully, "I need a few golden silk fantasy stones. It seems that fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't have any?" "No. I have never heard of it." Xiaohua was also very regretful. He looked at the bell in the grid and said, "I have a few old spirit herbs. Fellow Taoist Zhong needs them, we can exchange them. Otherwise, old spirit herbs?" Zhong Xiaohan's eyes lit up and said with a smile, "How old are they?" Seeing that there was hope, Xiaohua asked again, "How old does fellow Taoist Zhong need?" "1,000-year-old exquisite grass. Does fellow Taoist Xiao have it?" Sigh, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air and said with a bitter smile, "Fellow Taoist Zhong really thinks too highly of me. 1,000-year-old exquisite grass, how could I have it? Besides, fellow Taoist Zhong naturally has Immortal Music Sect's Foundation Establishment pill. Why do you still need exquisite grass?" Didn't fellow Taoist Xiao want to know how old I need it?" "I already said it, why did you refuse?" Zhong Xiaohan said with a smile, "The more Foundation Establishment pills, the better. If I wait until I reach Foundation Establishment and find out that I don't have enough Foundation Establishment pills, don't you think I will regret it to death?" Fellow Taoist Zhong is right. Xiaohua nodded, "I have exquisite grass here, but it's only 600 years old. In fact, it was prepared to exchange for Foundation Establishment pills. However, I am still far from Foundation Establishment, so I will exchange it for fellow Taoist Zhong first." "Ah, really? It's really 600 years old?" Zhong Xiaohan seemed to be surprised and said with pleasant surprise. She was so happy that she actually forgot to transmit her voice. A few disciples passing by also stopped and looked at the two of them in surprise. Sorry. Zhong Xiaohan realized that she forgot herself and said while covering her mouth, "I wonder if fellow Taoist Xiao can let I take a look." "Sure." Xiaohua took out a storage pouch and handed it over. As expected. Zhong Xiaohan opened it and looked, a satisfied smile appeared on her face. Seeing Zhong Xiaohan's smile, Xiaohua's heart also felt at ease. He said with a smile, "Is fellow Taoist Zhong satisfied?" "Of course." Zhong Xiaohan also took out a storage pouch and handed it over with a smile. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please take a look." When Xiaohua looked, there was indeed a book inside. After taking it out and roughly looking through it, Xiaohua unconsciously became happy. Just as he expected, this soul-collecting bell was indeed an ancestral artifact of a side branch of Shi country's Shao Nancheng clan. "Good." Xiaohua raised his hand and put the broken bell into the storage pouch. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Many thanks, fellow Taoist Zhong. Farewell." "You're welcome." Zhong Xiaohan's eyes narrowed like two crescent moons, making her faint eyebrows even more tasteful. But just as Xiaohua turned around, Zhong Xiaohan suddenly asked, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, do you still have exquisite grass? I don't believe that you didn't leave some for yourself." Fellow Taoist Zhong, what do you think?" Xiaohua smiled and turned around to leave. After walking for a while, Xiaohua began to mutter. He had so many Foundation Establishment pills in his storage pouch, but he didn't think about the use of Foundation Establishment pills for these peak 12th stage Qi refinement disciples. Who wouldn't want more Foundation Establishment pills? Thinking back to that year, Xiang Yang cultivated for 50 years because he didn't have enough Foundation Establishment pills. And the Foundation Establishment pills in each sect were presumably limited, so each disciple was given a fixed amount. If he used Foundation Establishment pills or exquisite grass to exchange for things with these disciples, most likely he would succeed, right? But immediately Xiaohua denied it. This trade fair was exchanged with his real face. It was still possible to exchange for a magic artifact, but if he exchanged too much, he wouldn't be able to explain the origin of the exquisite grass, right? If this was known by the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples, it would be troublesome. Another disciple is here. Just as Xiaohua was pondering, the surrounding disciples whispered again. Sure enough, Shanghua Sect, Kunlun Sect, and Nanming Sect also came to the square under the lead of the Taiching Sect disciples. Good, finally everyone is here. Xiaohua watched these disciples enter the pavilion, then put his attention on the things on the ground. However, there were many things in this square, and there were also many disciples who came to look for things they wanted. How could Xiaohua see them one by one? After walking for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he still didn't see any gold leaf. Xiaohua couldn't help but feel vexed. This Buddhist thing, why is it so hard to find? Before, when I didn't know, I could find it easily, but now I can't find even one. Could it be that the gold leaf is scattered in my country of Shi? Oh right, how could this young master forget to use Buddhist awareness? It's not allowed to use divine awareness to search a large area. Even foundation establishment cultivators can't find Buddhist awareness, why not use it? Xiaohua slapped his forehead as he came to a realization. Then he released his Buddhist awareness. However, just as his Buddhist awareness spread out for several meters, a similar Buddhist awareness swept over. Chapter 1607. It was the same Buddhist sense, but it was much stronger than Xiaohua's Buddhist sense. Xiaohua felt that this Buddhist sense was extremely viscous, like goat's milk. Compared to it, his Buddhist sense was like clear water. Ouch! Xiaohua was shocked and quickly withdrew his Buddhist sense. However, it was already too late to withdraw at this time. That powerful Buddhist consciousness followed the withdrawal of Xiaohua's Buddhist consciousness and immediately locked onto Xiaohua. This is bad. Xiaohua hastily looked around, wanting to find a place to hide. He even wanted to fly away. However, there were many disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly. Although it wasn't bustling, it was still very lively. Where could he find a place to hide? What should I do? Just as he was thinking, Xiaohua saw a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator in the distance. He was staring at him with bright eyes as he walked over unhurriedly. A late-stage foundation establishment cultivator? Xiaohua immediately gave up on the idea of escaping. If it was an early or middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator, Xiaohua might have been able to escape using the hibernating lightning escape. However, he was helpless against the late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. The slowly approaching cultivator was tall and wore a light-colored Taoist robe. His hair was as white as snow and there was a light golden Taoist crown on his head. Looking at the cultivator's appearance, he had a red face and two thick black broom eyebrows. Under his eyebrows was a pair of eyes staring at Xiaohua, full of astonishment. When Xiaohua's eyes met with the cultivator's, he felt a sharp pain in his eyes. He couldn't help but look away as panic rose in his heart. The cultivator walked in front of Xiaohua and didn't stop. He transmitted his voice in a low voice, "Follow me." Xiaohua didn't dare to disobey. He could only lower his head and follow the cultivator into the crowd. The cultivator separated the crowd and walked towards the north side of the plaza. Occasionally, a few disciples would bow and greet him as martial uncle. When they reached the edge of the plaza, the cultivator transmitted his voice again, "Wait here for a moment. Later look for me in this direction. I have something to ask you. Don't have any crooked thoughts. Since you've entered the bright realm, I can find you no matter what." "Yes, I understand." Xiaohua turned around and walked a few steps to the side, pretending to look at the things on the side. The cultivator didn't reply. He walked out of the square and entered the forest outside. After a short while, he disappeared without a trace. Xiaohua absent-mindedly looked at the silent bargaining of the people beside him for a while. Seeing that it was about time, he turned around and was about to leave when a very familiar, yet somewhat probing voice sounded from the side, Xiaohua. Xiaohua stared blankly and looked over. He saw a cultivator with a storage bag in his hand staring at Xiaohua from the side of the grid. "Zhuo Qingyuan? Senior Zhuo?" Xiaohua was stunned. In his heart, Zhuo Qingyuan should have reached the foundation establishment realm a long time ago, and his cultivation should be the same as Li Zongbao's. So, how could he possibly appear in the Feather Immortal Assembly? But when Xiaohua looked at Zhuo Qingyuan's cultivation, he immediately understood that Zhuo Qingyuan was still at the peak of the 12th layer of qi refining. From the looks of it, Zhuo Qingyuan had also come here in search of a fortuitous encounter that would allow him to enter the foundation establishment realm. "Senior Zhuo." Xiaohua quickly walked a few steps forward and bowed, "Long time no see. How are you, Senior Zhuo?" Zhuo Qingyuan put away the storage bag and said with a bitter smile, "I was blind. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Xiao to already be at the late stage of qi refining. I wouldn't dare." Xiaohua hurriedly smiled apologetically, "I didn't deliberately hide it that day." Xiaohua still wanted to explain to Zhuo Qingyuan, but the latter waved his hand and said with a smile, "Needless to say, who doesn't have secrets? I'm not a curious person. Thank you for your understanding, Senior Zhuo." Xiao Hua said with a smile. Senior Zhua is also here to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly, right? Ah, Junior Xiao, what are you asking? If I'm not here to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly, then what am I doing here? Zhuo Qingyuan looked at the disciples walking past him and sighed. You didn't see, the last time Junior Xiao came to my Xuanyan school, I was already at the 12th layer of qi refining. After all these years, Junior Xiao has already recovered his cultivation, but I am still at the late stage of the 12th layer of qi refining. If I didn't come to the Feather Immortal Assembly to look for an opportunity, what else could I be doing? Xiaohua was sad. Of course, Zhuo Qingyuan relied on the embryonic breathing pill to barely enter the 12th layer of qi refining. Foundation establishment was probably even more difficult. Junior Xiao, which sector you in now? Zhuo Qingyuan looked at the Taoist robe Xiaohua was wearing and asked, why are you participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly when you're just at the early stage of qi refining? I was lucky enough to enter the Imperial Thunder sect, and I'm also participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly this time by chance. Xiaohua explained. Then he looked left and right and said in a low voice, I have some matters to attend to, so I'll pay a visit to Senior Zhuo when I return. Okay, then go. Zhuo Qingyuan waved his hand. That's right, Senior Zhuo, then. Xiao Mao. Xiaohua asked in a low voice, but his eyes were fixed on Zhuo Qingyuan's eyes, afraid that regret would appear in his eyes. Oh, Junior Xiao. Zhuo Qingyuan said with a smile. Junior Xiao has already come out of seclusion, and his life is in good condition. That's great. Xiaohua felt a burst of joy in his heart, and Xiao Mao's sincere smiling face appeared in his mind. Zhuo Qingyuan looked left and right, then transmitted his voice. Moreover, Junior Zhao's cultivation has improved greatly, and he's already at the 9th layer of qi refining. Ah? 9th layer of qi refining? Xiaohua knew that Xiao Mao's explosive increase in cultivation was definitely due to the fire essence flame crystal, so it wasn't strange, but he still said with extreme shock. Naturally, he's at the 9th layer of qi refining. Zhuo Qingyuan's face also revealed a joyful expression. How many years has it been? Junior Xiao broke through 5 layers of qi refining in one go? I really don't dare to believe it. Zhuo Qingyuan chuckled. Junior Xiao, if you don't believe me, you can come to my Xuanyan school to take a look. Junior Xiao probably really wants to see you. Xiaohua secretly curled his lips. Xuanyan school? Good boy, if there's nothing, I won't walk right into a trap. Yet he said with a smile, of course, I'll definitely go when I's training. After Xiaohua finished speaking, he cupped his hands and walked towards the edge of the plaza, and similarly entered the forest. Xiaohua didn't dare to release his Buddhist sense. Sure enough, after walking forward for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, that cultivator was standing with his hands behind his back beside a stream. What's your name? Which sector you from? That cultivator turned his head and transmitted his voice. Disciple Xiaohua from the Imperial Thunder sect of the state of Xi. Xiaohua didn't dare to conceal anything and replied respectfully. This relic of yours is a family heirloom? How many years have you practiced it? Disciple is a loose cultivator. This relic, disciple has fumbled, and practiced it for 20 years. That cultivator raised his brow and said with a smile. Not bad, although you've practiced this relic incorrectly, to actually be able to practice Buddhist sense without anyone's guidance is indeed difficult for you. Practicing the relic incorrectly? Xiaohua stared blankly. It seems, I've practiced it completely according to the exquisite palette scripture, without the slightest deviation. Senior, please give me some pointers. Where did disciple practice incorrectly? Xiaohua's eyes turned as he transmitted his voice. This old man's cultivation method is different from yours, how can I give pointers? Moreover, this old man also practiced according to a secret manual of the Buddhist sect. I reckon it's only slightly more complete than yours. That cultivator said with a smile. However, from my cultivation experience, Buddhist sense and divine sense are the same. This old man cultivated from qi refinement to foundation establishment, and my divine sense became increasingly dignified, so my Buddhist sense must be the same. Your Buddhist sense is as light as a feather, like a cool breeze, so naturally you've practiced it incorrectly. And perhaps your cultivation method is of a low rank, so the relic you've refined is also lowly. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Disciple didn't know before and always thought that the Buddhist sect's cultivation method was the same as the cultivation method. Only later did I gradually realize the difference, but it was already too late. You're also lucky to be able to come across a cultivation method left behind by the Buddhist sect, and even learn about the Buddhist sect. That cultivator sneered. The most fortunate thing is that you actually weren't discovered by the masters of the cultivation sects. What? Don't tell me. Xiao Hua suddenly thought of a helpless expression, and of course he wanted to say something but hesitated. There's nothing difficult about it. That cultivator said decisively, as long as you were discovered, you absolutely wouldn't have any chance of survival. Is this serious? Xiao Hua's complexion changed dramatically. That cultivator raised his eyes to look into the distance and sneered, the struggle between Buddhism and Taoism isn't just serious. The struggle between Buddhism and Taoism? What do you mean? Xiao Hua was even more puzzled. That cultivator waved his hand, don't ask so much, this old man also doesn't know. If this old man hadn't occasionally flipped through these matters in the pile of old books in the Kunlun Palace and had a little understanding, I'm afraid I also wouldn't have known the crucial points. That's right, I am Kunlun Sect's Hanju. Greetings, Martial Uncle Hanju. Xiao Hua bowed in greeting. Do you know why this old man called you over? Hanju nodded. Xiao Hua shook his head. This disciple is stupid, this disciple doesn't know. This disciple only knows it's because of Buddhist awareness. And this old man has always been looking for you, but after searching for almost 100 years, I finally found you, a cultivator who cultivated Buddhist awareness. Yes, Xiao Hua answered, and then he transmitted his voice. Don't tell me it's very difficult to cultivate Sariras? I don't know if it was difficult or not when Buddhism was flourishing in the past. But now that Buddhism has already been exterminated, the cultivation methods left behind are all incomplete, even inferior to true cultivation methods. Wanting to use them to cultivate Buddhist awareness is simply as difficult as ascending to the heavens. No, it's even harder than cultivating to nascent soul. Xiao Hua naturally understood. There were originally very few cultivators who cultivated Buddhism, and those who could condense Sariras and cultivate Buddhist awareness were naturally even fewer. There was nothing strange about this. Don't tell me this cultivator wants to take this young master as a disciple. Pass on the Buddhist cultivation method he cultivates to this young master? An unimaginable thought appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. Xiao Hua, do you think spiritual force is better or Buddhist awareness is better? Hanju suddenly asked. Naturally, spiritual force is better. Xiao Hua's eyes turned and he smiled apologetically. Hanju also didn't find it strange and he smiled. Your Imperial Thunder sect has many methods to control spiritual force, so you naturally say spiritual force is better. If you obtain the method to control Buddhist awareness, you'll know. Many times, spiritual force is far inferior to Buddhist awareness. As he spoke, he reached out with his hand, took out a dazzling golden object and threw it to Xiao Hua and transmitted his voice. This is the method to control Buddhist awareness, take a look. Chapter 1608. This. Xiao Hua took the golden object with some surprise, but before he could take a closer look, Hanju frowned and waved his hand. Someone's coming. Put this golden object away. When you have time, use your Buddhist awareness to take a look. I'll come find you when I have time. After he finished speaking, he flung his sleeve and his body swayed strangely. He used an unknown escape technique and disappeared without a trace. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and stored the golden eye into his space. Just as he walked to the stream and sat down cross-legged, two silhouettes flew over from the plaza. One of them, a 10th layer Qi refining cultivator, respectfully landed in front of Xiao Hua. He bowed and said with a smile, Senior Martial Brother, why are you here instead of exchanging things at the plaza? Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at that disciple, then looked at the early-stage foundation establishment disciple flying in the air. He said with a smile, I just had a sudden feeling at the E-assembly and wanted to find a place to meditate. Because I didn't have time to return to the pavilion, I found this place to meditate first. Did I violate your sect's taboo? That's not it. The Qi refining disciple said very warmly, I'm very happy that Senior Martial Brother was able to make a breakthrough at the Feather Immortal Assembly. However, this bright realm is born from magic treasures. There are many unknown dangers in many places. For safety's sake, it's best for Senior Martial Brother to stay in your room. What about here? Xiao Hua looked around and asked with a smile. The Qi refining disciple looked back at the foundation establishment disciple. Seeing the latter nod slightly, he said, Senior Martial Brother, if you want to meditate here you can. However, don't go any further. When Senior Martial Brother finishes meditating, you'd better return to the square as soon as possible. Thank you for the reminder, Junior Martial Brother. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and continued to meditate. Seeing that Xiao Hua was unwilling to leave, the two disciples didn't say anything else and flew away. They wanted to look for Kunlun Sect's frost bamboo again. Xiao Hua sat next to the stream. Although his face was as calm as water, his thoughts were rippling like the stream in front of him. This frost bamboo. Could it be that it really wants to guide my Buddhist cultivation? It's possible. Didn't you hear what he said? He searched for 100 years before he finally found someone like me who had cultivated the Buddhist consciousness. Thinking about it carefully, it's normal. The rainbow epiphyllum used to make my Buddha Sarira has been growing for who knows how many years. If it was placed on someone else, it would be impossible to find it. But? Xiao Hua said, but for a long time, but he didn't say anything. He felt that something wasn't right. He always felt that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world, but he couldn't figure out what was wrong. Forget it. Let's wait and see. Xiao Hua thought to himself, after the Feather Immortal Assembly, I'll have to return to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Hanju is only a Kunlun Sect Foundation establishment cultivator. No matter how bold he is, he won't find the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Garden, right? My practice of Buddha Sarira is a great taboo in the cultivation world, isn't it the same for him? If I don't dare to say it, he wouldn't dare to say it either. After thinking about it, Xiao Hua's heart calmed down. He stayed in the mountains and rivers for a while before returning to EG. At this time, there were even more people in the square and there were many things. However, Xiao Hua didn't have the mood to explore. He only found a few things that seemed to have some background and asked. The other party all opened their mouths like lions, asking for either foundation establishment pills or cultivation methods. Xiao Hua lost the slightest interest and turned back to the pavilion. Just as he entered the pavilion, he bumped into Yuan Bo and Minggu. The two of them looked a little unnatural. Yuan Bo smiled and said, "Junior brother Xiao, why are you back so soon? Why didn't you find anything good?" The things in EG are too rare. Every opening is frightening. I was originally a rogue cultivator. How can I have these spirit stones? It's better to come back and hide in peace. That's easy. Yuan Bo pulled Xiao Hua's sleeve and said, "Junior brother Xiao, follow me. Whatever you like, just tell me. I'll help you." Xiao Hua was stunned. After joining the Imperial Thunder Sect, he had never seen Yuan Bo so affectionate. Why did he suddenly change today? I'm afraid that's not good. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand. I'm afraid I can't repay senior brother's enthusiasm. It's fine. Yuan Bo smiled and said, "You and I are from the same sect. This is nothing. Of course, if junior brother Xiao feels apologetic, you can let me comprehend the flying speed method." Xiao Hua pulled his sleeve back from Yuan Bo's hand and said with a smile, "I suddenly felt something and want to go back to the quiet room to comprehend it. I won't accompany you too. Excuse me." Watching Xiao Hua's back disappear into the quiet room's restriction, Minggu sneered, "Forget it. A lousy rogue cultivator. Refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. Why bother with him? I gave you face but you didn't want it." Yuan Bo also sneered. "Junior brothers, who are you talking about?" Wang Yunxiao's voice sounded. He had just returned from outside the square. It's fine. Min Gu smiled apologetically, "We were just grumbling blindly." Wang Yunxiao glanced at Xiao Hua's quiet room and transmitted his voice. "When did Xiao Hua return?" Yuan Bo's eyes turned and he also replied, "He just returned." Why did senior brother Wang mention this? "Come with me." Wang Yunxiao's face showed a trace of strangeness. He waved his hand and brought the two into the quiet room. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the three people's faces carried a trace of strangeness and a trace of a smile. When they came out of the quiet room and passed by Xiao Hua's quiet room, they looked at each other and a trace of pride appeared on their faces. How did Xiao Hua, who was in the quiet room, know about this? In the range of Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense, the golden eye was suffused with a golden brilliance, revealing the light and shadow of a thick book. As Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense flipped, the book's pages were also flipped one by one. As he flipped, Xiao Hua's face gradually showed a dignified expression. When he had roughly finished reading the book slowly closed. The light and shadow on the book disappeared and it returned to a thin golden leaf. This golden leaf was a bit similar to Xiao Hua's Buddhist leaf. Xiao Hua waved his hand and the golden eye was stored in the space. Xiao Hua frowned and looked straight ahead, thinking, what is recorded in the golden eye is the control of Buddhist sense and the magical powers of Buddhist cultivation. It's the real deal. However, the content seems to be divided into 2 volumes. This is only the first volume. Hanju didn't say it clearly. Is he trying to keep me in suspense? Or does he want me to cultivate? How can I not eat a piece of meat that is delivered to my door? Xiao Hua made a decision in an instant and thought, I'll first learn how to hide Buddhist scents. Fortunately, there are no nascent soul cultivators in this Feather Immortal Assembly and no Golden Core cultivators who know how to detect Buddhist scents. Otherwise, I would have lost my life long ago. Xiao Hua sat cross-legged with a solemn look. The swastika between his eyebrows flashed faintly and the Buddha Sarira outside his Naiwan palace also emitted a faint Buddhist light. Outside the pavilion, in the square, on the west side, which was very close to the pavilion of the Imperial Thunder Sect, a dozen handsome men and beautiful women in bright clothes were chatting casually with smiles on their faces. At the same time, their eyes were wandering around the items in the cubicles. They were the disciples of the Huanhua sect. At the front, Fairy Hong Xia, whose face was as cold as frost, exuded a layer of coldness. This coldness seemed to be born from her bones and faintly repelled people thousands of miles away. However, it was also this coldness that attracted the gazes of many male disciples, causing many disciples to easily shift their gazes away from the cubicles and stick to her picturesque and fairy-like features. Fairy Hong Xia did not care about this at all. Her bright eyes wandered and fell on a broken jade rui on the cubicle in front of her. Before Fairy Hong Xia could stop, Yun Jichong, who had been observing Fairy Hong Xia from the side, took a step forward and said loudly to the disciple in the cubicle, "Junior brother, how much do you want to pay for this jade rui?" That disciple looked at the disciples of the Huanhua sect and said with a smile, "Senior brother, this jade rui is a magic treasure. It's just that it's a bit broken. Of course, with my cultivation level, I'm afraid I don't know about it. I want to exchange this thing for 10 foundation establishment pills. Senior brother, I wonder. You're too greedy, aren't you?" Before Yun Jichong could say anything, a disciple at the side shouted first, I want this price. If you don't like it, you can go elsewhere." That disciple did not get angry and only said with a smile. Yun Jichong did not say anything and only glanced at Fairy Hong Xia. Fairy Hong Xia did not say anything and only frowned and looked carefully at the cubicle. Thinking that he had figured out Fairy Hong Xia's thoughts, Yun Jichong revealed a smile and thought to himself, "Junior sister Hong Xia has walked for so long and did not even stop at a single cubicle. She actually stopped in front of this jade rui. She must like it. As for whether this thing is worth 10 foundation establishment pills or not, would I care?" Then he cupped his hands and said, "Junior brother, foundation establishment pills? Let's not talk about it. I don't think anyone will take out that thing in this trade fair. We sincerely want it. How many spirit stones do you want to make a deal?" "Great." That disciple clapped his hands and laughed. He rolled his eyes and told Yun Jichong the price. Others did not know how much this was, but when they saw the slight change in Yun Jiechong's expression, they naturally knew that it was not a small number. Sure enough, Yun Jiechong transmitted his voice again. After a while, they seemed to have reached an agreement. When Yun Jiechong took out his storage bag and was about to hand it over to that person, Wang Yunxiao and the other two quickly walked out from the pavilion of the Imperial Thunder Sect. When Fairy Hong Xia saw people coming out from the pavilion, her eyes flickered. However, when she saw that they were unrelated people, she shifted her gaze away. She did not linger and walked to another place. Junior sister, junior sister." Yun Jichong held the jade rui that he had just exchanged and chased after her. As he walked, he shouted, "I have exchanged for the jade rui. What do you think?" However, Fairy Hong Xia only turned her head slightly and reached out her hand to take the jade rui. After looking at it for a while, she handed it over without saying a word. "Junior sister, this is what you want. What's wrong? Is it not to your liking?" Yun Jichong did not take it seriously and kept the jade rui. He smiled and said, "It's okay. There are many things in this square. There must be something that you like." At this moment, a few disciples who looked like elegant young masters came over. The one in front was not inferior to Yun Jichong. When that disciple saw Fairy Hong Xia, his eyes lit up. He walked a few steps forward and cupped his hands. "I am Su Fu from the Immortal Ascension sect. Greetings to this fairy." Chapter 1609. Seeing this, Fairy Hong Xia looked at Su Fu from head to toe. She didn't want to talk to him, but then she remembered that they were all disciples from different sects who came to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly. She cupped her hands and said, "I don't deserve to be called fairy. Then she walked past Su Fu without introducing herself. However, Su Fu raised his hand and stopped Fairy Hongxia. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, Fairy Hongxia. They are Wu Qiming and He Shoujing from my sect. They are two of the most powerful cultivators in Meng Kingdom. They would like to share their experiences with Fairy Hongxia." Then the two disciples beside Su Fu walked in front of Fairy Hongxia and blocked her way. They cupped their hands and said, "I've heard of Fairy Hongxia's name for a long time. Now that I've met you today, you really live up to your reputation. The path to immortality is long and we cultivators should help each other. Since Fairy Hongxia has come to Meng Kingdom, we should be the hosts." Looking at his attitude, it was almost as if he was a hooligan in the mortal world who took liberties with women. Fairy Hongxia could not help but be taken aback. She had never met such a shameless cultivator. Naturally, before Fairy Hongxia could say anything, Yun Jiechong stepped in front of Fairy Hongxia and sneered, "I've heard of the reputation of the Immortal Ascension sect even though I'm far away in Shi. I never thought that the disciples of the Immortal Ascension sect would be so shameless as to block the way. I am talking to Fairy Hongxia. What does that have to do with you?" Su Fu narrowed his eyes and stared at Yin Jiechong. "You're just a disciple of Qi refining level 12. How dare you be so arrogant in Meng Kingdom?" Yun Jiechong snorted, "I'm a disciple of Qi refining level. Are you a senior of Foundation establishment level?" "I don't want to." Su Fu waved his hand and pointed at Fairy Hongxia. Just as he was about to speak, a cold snort came from behind him. Then an extremely cold pressure enveloped Su Fu and the other two disciples. A voice so cold that ice could fall from it said, "A good dog doesn't block the way. A bad dog that blocks the way. I just arrived in Meng Kingdom and I've already met such a vicious dog. Taiching sect is really useless. If you have any grudges, take them out during the Feather Immortal duel tomorrow. Why are you doing this? Ai's eyes are tainted for no reason." Su Fu, Wu Qiming and He Shoujing were terrified. They did not even have the strength to turn around. Yun Guichong and Fairy Hongxia looked up and saw a young cultivator with a head full of white hair. His face seemed to be frosty as he slowly walked over. He was actually a Foundation Establishment senior. Needless to say, this Foundation Establishment cultivator was Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction, who had made a breakthrough in the Leeching Treasure Mirror. "Greetings, senior." Fairy Hongxia, Yun Guichong and the others immediately bowed. Li Zongbao nodded his head and scanned the crowd. His gaze lingered on Fairy Hongxia's face for a moment longer before he walked past them. "My fellow cultivator." After Li Zongbao left, Yun Guichong quickly grabbed a disciple of the Utopia faction behind Li Zongbao and asked in a low voice, "Who is this senior?" The apprentice of the Utopia faction smirked and said proudly, "Who else could it be? Naturally, I'm the youngest Foundation Establishment cultivator in the cultivation world." Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction? Yun Guichong could not help but exclaim. But then he realized it was inappropriate and quickly said with a smile, "So it's Senior Li of the Utopia faction. No wonder, no wonder." The apprentice of the Utopia faction did not blame him and followed Li Zongbao. After Li Zongbao left, Su Fu and the others could naturally move their hands and feet. At this time, the three of them were not in the mood. They looked at each other and left dejectedly. Fairy Hongxia straightened up and looked at Li Zongbao's tall and straight back, who was gradually disappearing into the crowd. She saw his striking white hair and her eyes were filled with extraordinary splendor. She thought to herself, the youngest Foundation Establishment cultivator? That's not necessarily true. After that, Fairy Hongxia also lost interest and went back to the pavilion alone. On the morning of the second day, as soon as a corner of the rising sun appeared from the east, the moving sound of music could be heard from within the radiant realm. Soon after, countless celestial birds flew up from the surroundings of the square and began to dance gracefully. The sky was overflowing with all kinds of colors and it was extremely gorgeous. The 12 cultivation sects of the Shi state, the Lian state and the Meng state stood on three sides of the square respectively. The apprentices of the Taiching sect stood below the high platform at the head of the square. A thunderous sound rang out, and from the eastern side of the square, a beam of orange light rose into the air. From the light, more than 20 people slowly flew over. They were the main envoys and vice-envoys of the various sections. The first to fly over was a cultivator in the later stage of the Golden Core realm. He was not tall and had two extremely long eyebrows. He was holding a golden horsetail whisk in his hand. The cultivator flew to the sky above the high platform and landed slightly. He said loudly, "I, Deming, am here to welcome all the disciples of the various sects to the Feather Immortal Meet of the Taiching sect. The apprentices did not dare to be negligent. They all bowed and said in unison, "Greetings, Senior Deming." Deming swung the horsetail whisk. In the square, the 200 or so apprentices all felt as if they were supported by a pair of hands. They slowly straightened up. Then Deming said with a smile, "The foundation establishment stage is the first checkpoint on the path of cultivation. It is also the beginning of the true cultivation. I also started my cultivation from the Qi refining realm. Naturally, I know how difficult it is. Although all of you are Qi refining realm cultivators, the heavy responsibility of the future development of each sect is on your shoulders. Maybe in a few hundred years, one of your apprentices will be like I and achieve the golden core realm. Then he will stand in the sky and say the same thing to the Qi refining disciples. I don't have much to say. I only hope that all of you will remember that the path of cultivation is never a smooth one." "Thank you for your guidance, Senior." The apprentices bowed again and said. Then Deming flew back a little. Another cultivator of the Taiching sect flew forward. He was an early gold core realm cultivator. That cultivator waved his hand and said, "I, Renju, am the host of this Feather Immortal Meet. This time 294 apprentices of 13 cultivation sects from the Meng country, the Lian country, and the Shi country will participate. Just like the previous Feather Immortal Meets, you will be divided into 8 groups to compete. For the sake of fairness, the disciples of the same sect in each group will not fight each other. Therefore if you win you will get 3 points. If you lose you will get no points." Renju spoke frankly and confidently, explaining the specific rules of the competition. Xiao Hua and the apprentices of the thunder-controlling sect were in a corner of the square. They did not listen attentively. He had already made preparations. As soon as he got on the stage he would check the cultivation of his opponent and then be ready to admit defeat at any time. This kind of experience was not very beneficial to him. Moreover, he would have to pay with his life. It was really not worth it. He did not understand why Chen Diheng, whose cultivation was only in the middle of the 12th level of the Qi refining realm, was so keen to come to the Feather Immortal Meet. The Taiching sect is really generous. Just the compensation is foundation establishment pills. What an unexpected gain. Xiao Hua thought to himself as he closed his eyes slightly to comprehend the Buddhist sense concealment method that he had just obtained yesterday. At this time Renju's voice came again. 4 apprentices will be selected from each group. A total of 32 apprentices will enter the final competition. These 32 apprentices will be randomly arranged in a random order. There can only be one winner in each competition. Then the 16 apprentices who won will be arranged in a random order again. In this way the first, the second, the third, and the third. Just like in the past, the first 32 apprentices of the Feather Immortal Meet will be rewarded. The first, second, and third will be rewarded with magic treasures, cultivation methods, and magic tools respectively. The first has the right to choose first. The second will be ranked after the first. The last 2 apprentices will have to depend on luck. After Renju finished explaining the general rules, Renju flew to the side and waved her hand. A strange brilliance appeared on the high platform below her. However, the item within the formation was still not revealed. Renju said with a smile, "This is a novel item that my Taiching sect has recently obtained. It is specially taken out as a reward for the Feather Immortal Meet this time. After the top 4 apprentices of the Feather Immortal Meet are ranked, the top 32 apprentices will compete to obtain this item. Whoever wins in the end will obtain this item. As for what this item is, please allow me to keep you in suspense. I will reveal it in the final competition." "Keeping me in suspense?" Xiao Hua shrugged and laughed inwardly. Daojing is like this and Renju is also like this. Why are all the cultivators of the Taiching sect so interesting? Alright, disciples, although the rewards of the Feather Immortal Meet are generous, breaking through to the foundation establishment realm is your ultimate goal. Therefore, this Feather Immortal Meet is the same as before. Life and death are not allowed. Moreover, the illusion of the competition will not be opened before the time limit is up. If any of you feel that your strength is insufficient, you can activate your magic tablet and choose to give up when the illusion is opened. Also, any disciple who can break through to the foundation establishment realm during the competition must immediately withdraw from the Feather Immortal Meet. Oh, there is a time limit for the competition? Xiao Hua was stunned. He was prepared to give up as soon as he entered the illusion. Once there was a time limit, he had no choice but to give it his all. At this moment, A brilliant sword light suddenly flashed from outside the square and pierced towards Renju. Ah! All the apprentices in the square saw this and couldn't help but gasp. They thought to themselves, which cultivator is so arrogant? He actually dares to sneak attack a gold core cultivator in front of so many other cultivators? When they looked at Renju again, there was no fear on her face. Instead, there was a kind of astonishment and a kind of joy. She just stretched out her hand and pinched casually. That sword light was not what the apprentices thought. It was easily pinched by Renju. Then a clear voice came from the sword light. Zhang Yuha and Zhang Yutong of the Shenzhen sect of the Huan country are here to pay a visit to the fellow cultivators of the Meng country, the Lian country and the Shi country. A flying sword message? A disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace in front of Xiaohua suddenly exclaimed. This is a sword cultivator of the Huan country? Then the knowledgeable apprentices in the square all whispered to each other. Sure enough, Renju looked back at Deming and said loudly, it has been a long time since a sword cultivator of the Huan country participated in the Feather Immortal meet. My Taiching sect is really lucky to have a sword cultivator here today. Let us welcome the disciples of the Shenzhen sect. As he spoke, he waved his hand and the sword light flew back. However, a moment later, two even more resplendent sword lights, one green and one purple, shot through the air and flew into the air above the square. Chapter 16:10. When the sword light retracted its brilliance, what appeared was two small and exquisite female cultivators dressed in tight clothes on the two flying swords. The two female cultivators were intimidating, like unsheathed swords. The clothes of these two female cultivators were naturally different from what Xiaohua usually saw. Their entire bodies were short and did not have the slightest bit of burden. The appearance of their clothes was also strange, and there were faintly some runes flashing from different places. Looking at the two female cultivators, they had snow-white skin, graceful figures, and a head full of black hair that was neatly coiled on top of their heads. This wasn't the most eye-catching thing. What surprised everyone the most was that the two female cultivators had the same figure, the same clothes, and even their bright eyes and white teeth were the same. They were actually a pair of twin sisters. When the two stood there, they looked exactly the same. The two female cultivators activated the sword light under their feet and came in front of Renju and the others. They bowed and saluted. Juniors Zhang Yuha and Zhang Yutong greet the seniors. Renju and the others raised their hands to return the salute. Then Renju looked at them and said curiously, I am Renju, the host of the Feather Immortal Assembly this time. I have a question that I want to ask. Juniors Zhang Yuha answered the senior's question. The female cultivator on the left said quickly with a smile. I see that your cultivation is only at the first stage of the drawing sword realm, which should be the same as my early stage foundation establishment disciples. Why didn't I see a teacher protecting you and you came all the way to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly of the Three Kingdoms of Cultivation? This seems different from before. Zhang Yuha answered without hesitation. Although we are at the first stage of the drawing sword realm in terms of fighting power, we might not lose to your sect's middle stage foundation establishment disciples. Why can't we come to Meng country with such cultivation? Renju chuckled. The attacks of sword cultivators are the envy of us cultivators. However, the distance from the state of Huan to here is more than 10,000 kilometers. Although the two of you have the strength of middle stage foundation establishment, you were able to safely arrive at my Taiching sect. Although you are both at the first stage of the drawing sword realm, representing the sword cultivators of Huan country with only two disciples at the first stage of the drawing sword realm, I'm afraid, it's disrespectful to the three kingdoms of cultivation. It's also difficult to protect the dignity of sword cultivators, right? Just as Zhang Yuha was about to speak, the female cultivator who had been silent all this time pulled her arm and said softly, Junior Zhang Yutong greets Senior Renju. The two of us didn't come here especially to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly, and we only came here to watch the show after we heard the news. We really don't dare to represent our sect or sword cultivators. Senior, please forgive my elder sister's words. Oh, I see, Renju was enlightened. She smiled and said, it's fine, it's fine. Even though the sword cultivators of the Huan nation and the three nations of cultivation cultivate different daos, you are still juniors. Since you are able to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly, I still welcome you on behalf of the Taiching sect and the three nations of cultivation. Are you two little friends here to observe? Or do you want to participate in the competition? Fight, fight. Zhang Yuha immediately said, I have long wanted to see the means of the disciples of the three kingdoms, elder sister. Zhang Yutong quickly stopped her and said to Renju with an apologetic smile, "Actually, Senior, we came to Ming country for something important, and we happened to run into the Feather Immortal Assembly. That's why we came here to ask for your help." Hearing that Zhang Yutong and the others had something to ask, Renju didn't dare to make a decision. She turned to Deming. "Renju, you will host the Feather Immortal Assembly. My two little friends, please follow I." Deming waved his hand and led Zhang Yutong and Zhang Yuhe to the pavilion next to the square. Renju said loudly, "Disciples, please take out your identity cards. The illusion array for the competition is right on the square. The place where your identity cards go will be the place where you will participate in the competition." After saying that, Renju made a gesture toward a place in the square. Ping ping ping, hundreds of sounds were heard. On the square, nearly 100 tricolored lights flew out from the grids in different places. Each of the lights was in the shape of a round ball. The lights were overflowing and the situation inside couldn't be seen clearly. As soon as Xiaohua took out his identity card, he saw a round ball in the distance. It turned into a beam of light and flew in front of Xiaohua, crashing into his identity card. Xiaohua knew that the illusion array he was going to enter was inside that round ball. At the same time, hundreds of lights crisscrossed on the square. The identity cards of each disciple were connected to the round ball by the corresponding light. When the disciples walked to the front of the round ball, all the lights converged and the overflowing of the round ball also stopped. The inside of the round ball was either a white cloud, a blue sky, or a vast plain. There were many different scenes. Standing next to Xiaohua was a dark and thin cultivator. His eyes, nose and ears were very small. He looked like he was in his 20s, but his cultivation was already at the peak of the 12th layer of the qi refining realm. I'm afraid he also took a youth-preserving spirit herb, Xiaohua secretly said in his heart. Seeing Xiaohua looking at him, the cultivator slightly narrowed his eyes. His originally small eyes were almost invisible. "Disciples, you just need to stand in front of the illusion array. A light bridge will immediately guide you to enter. The time limit for the competition is half an incense stick. During this time you can't enter or exit the illusion array." Just as Renju's words fell, the round ball emitted a bright light. A thick beam of light shot out from the round ball and covered Xiaohua and the disciple next to him. Then the two figures flew into the round ball. After their figures disappeared, two figures about the size of mung beans appeared in the blue sky and white clouds. Xiaohua was drawn into the sphere by the bridge of light. Seeing the sphere getting bigger and bigger, Xiaohua knew that his figure was getting smaller and smaller. When his vision blurred, when he looked again, there was a boundless sky in front of him. White clouds floated around him, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in front of him was also abundant. Where's that cultivator from just now?" Xiaohua's heart was moved. He clapped his hands and several defensive yellow talismans appeared in his hands. He urged his magic power to hit his body and then released his Buddhist sense. Sure enough, in a place extremely far away, the dark and thin cultivator also released his divine sense and carefully searched for Xiaohua. Seeing that the divine sense was about to sweep over, Xiaohua smiled in his heart and thought to himself, "This poor Taoist doesn't want to have a meaningless fight with you. Go ahead and search, this poor Taoist won't keep you company." Thinking this, Xiaohua used the hibernating thunder escape and quickly flew to the other side, wanting to avoid that cultivator's divine sense. However, Xiaohua only flew for a moment before a bright barrier blocked him. The barrier was soft but very firm. Needless to say, this must be the edge of the illusion array. Then Xiaohua flew all the way down. This time he flew a bit longer than before, but still he didn't see any land, only a layer of bright barrier. Damn it, why is this illusion array so small? Xiaohua cursed in his heart. He wanted to go to another place to take a look, but the cultivator's divine sense had already caught up. Seeing Xiaohua, the cultivator's face showed a trace of a sinister smile and transmitted a message, "Fellow Taoist, are you trying to escape?" Seeing that he was discovered, Xiaohua didn't panic. He flew into the air and cupped his hands, saying, "You can't say that I'm trying to escape, I just want to fight." "If you don't want to fight, then why did you come to the Feather Immortal Assembly?" The cultivator sneered, "However, with your cultivation in the early stage of qi refinement, if you don't have any life-saving methods, you really shouldn't come to the Feather Immortal Assembly. In our eyes, you're just a point for us to enter the top 32. Fellow Taoist, it's good that you know." Xiaohua cupped his hands, "When the time limit is up, I will immediately withdraw from the illusion array." "Fellow Taoist, good plan." The cultivator gave a thumbs up but then mocked, Fellow Taoist, don't you know that no one is allowed to fight in the Feather Immortal Assembly? If I just sit here and chat with fellow Taoist, when the time limit is up, I and fellow Taoist will be removed from the Feather Immortal Assembly. Xiaohua was helpless. He clapped his hand and took the white dust in his hand. He smiled bitterly. It seems that I have no choice but to fight? The cultivator's movements weren't slow either. He held a 1-foot-long magic artifact in his hand and sneered, "The Feather Immortal Assembly has such a rule precisely to dispel people like fellow Taoist who try to pass off as genuine. My Tai Ching sect has worked so hard for so long and spent so much effort to hold this Feather Immortal Assembly. How can it be over just because you're here? Fellow Taoist, please report your name. I am Xiaohua of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Let's see if fellow Taoist methods are as sharp as your words." Xiaohua chuckled. "I am He Yuan of the Tai Ching sect." After the dark and thin cultivator finished speaking, the magic artifact in his hand shook. A phantom escaped from the stick and flew in front of Xiaohua in the blink of an eye, smashing towards Xiaohua's forehead. Xiaohua also formed a seal in his hand, urging his spiritual power to also throw the purgatory dust into the air. At this time the purgatory dust was in the shape of a round ball. It spun in the air and emitted an earthy yellow brilliance, sucking the surrounding spiritual energy of the world into the ball. As Xiaohua pointed with his finger, a large ball of light flew out from the earthy yellow brilliance, blocking the incoming phantom. The rod's shadow collided with the ball's brilliance. Both of them turned into specks of light and slowly drifted down from the sky. He Fangyuan was somewhat surprised. His magic tool was a replica of Tai Ching sect's famous magic tool, Tai Yi Green Light Rod. It was called Tai Yi Green Light Rod. Although it couldn't compare to Tai Yi Green Light Rod, its power was not small. This first rod was admittedly meant to probe, so he only used 50% of his magic power. According to He Fangyuan's thinking, he should have at least destroyed Xiaohua's magic tool and broken Xiaohua's defense a bit. How could it be blocked so easily? Looking at the white dust above Xiaohua's head, a trace of greed flashed in He Fangyuan's eyes. Needless to say, Xiaohua was only at the initial stage of Qi refinement realm and dared to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly. This magic artifact was his greatest reliance. Look at Ai's methods. He Fangyuan laughed loudly and activated his magic power. The Tai Yi green light stick seemed to be very heavy in his hand. Without moving an inch, a light green phantom appeared. After dozens of phantoms appeared, He Fangyuan waved his hand and sent out another hand seal. Those dozens of phantoms actually formed a strange formation and attacked Xiaohua. Chapter 16:11. Do you think I am afraid of you? Xiaohua saw this and was slightly angry. He pointed his finger and the black dust gradually sped up, creating rings of phantoms around it. He Fangyuan, on the other hand, sneered as he recovered his Fa Li at the side. When others saw this pile of phantoms of his, they would use their artifacts to deal with them. Actually, He Fangyuan himself knew that these dozens of phantoms had an extremely mysterious connection, and could seal off all of the opponent's dodging angles. If he could not find the trick and get rid of the few crucial phantoms, the opponent could only be flustered, unable to attend to one thing and lose sight of another, and in the end up being beaten to death. Xiaohua's movements were not slow either. He repeatedly used the speck dust and grabbed a lot of light from the speck dust. Each light was able to destroy a phantom. But just as Fangyuan expected, Xiaohua could not find the trick to dealing with the sky full of rod phantoms. He could only use the earthen yellow light to deal with the different rod phantoms. Puff puff puff. A series of sounds rang out. Under Xiaohua's control, the dozens of phantoms created by the black dust barely blocked the dozens of staff phantoms. With Xiaohua's current Buddhist sense, he could barely do it. Junior brother Xiao is indeed extraordinary. Seeing the first wave of staff phantoms broken by Xiaohua, He Fangyuan was even more shocked. These were dozens of phantoms, and Xiaohua was able to use so many lights to deal with them in such a short time. It showed how extraordinary his divine sense was. Now look at Ai's methods. He Fangyuan once again activated his magic power. Xiaohua couldn't counterattack, and the dozens of staff phantoms once again flew out, attacking like a tidal wave. Xiaohua saw this and knew that although the black dust counterattack could be effective for a while, if it continued for a long time, he could only be in a defensive position and wouldn't be able to take the initiative. The opponent would eventually find a flaw and defeat him. Thus he didn't activate the black dust. With a wave of his hand, Dozens of top-grade fireball talismans were taken out. He activated his magic power and guided by his divine sense, they pounced on the dozens of phantoms. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Heat waves surged around Xiaohua, but an astonishing scene appeared. After the heat waves passed, not many of the staff phantoms were destroyed by the fireball talismans. There were still many staff phantoms flying towards Xiaohua from all directions. This is bad. Xiaohua's heart went cold when he saw the shadow in front of him. He didn't know that this Tai-E azure light was of the metal attribute and was extremely sharp. It was also a magic tool, so its brilliance was able to block the shadow of the staff. Although the fireball talisman was powerful, it was still a yellow talisman. Its attack couldn't be concentrated, so the Tai-E azure light could easily dodge it. What should we do? Xiaohua was startled and he hurriedly made a hand seal. The white dust above his head once again emitted an earthen yellow brilliance that enveloped Xiaohua. At the same time, He Fang Yuan's dozens of rod shadows had already struck down. Puff puff puff. Each time the staff shadow struck Hengchen's brilliance, the brilliance would waver slightly and be extinguished a little. By the time the staff shadow struck Hengchen's brilliance, 30% of the brilliance had already been extinguished. This still wasn't the worst. Just as the Tai-E azure light staff phantoms disappeared, He Fang Yuan's magic tool had already been brandished. The third wave of staff shadows had already arrived before Xiaohua's eyes. Xiaohua simply didn't have any chance to activate Hengchen to meet the attack. He could only passively defend. Xiaohua's forte lay in close combat. Admittedly, his magic power surpassed He Fang Yuan's, but his magic tool was inferior. Moreover, he had lost the initiative, so after one wrong move, every step was wrong. Seeing the third wave of staff shadows arrive, Xiaohua instantly made a decision. He simply ignored the staff shadows and allowed them to hit his body with crackling sounds. His body flew up and waved his hand. Just as he was about to take out the spirit crow fire net, a light shadow as thick as a bowl appeared out of thin air. It was precisely the white dust above Xiaohua's head. That white dust swayed twice, and the earthy yellow brilliance around Xiaohua's body immediately withdrew, all of it being absorbed into the white dust. Xiaohua was immediately exposed within the staff shadows. He Fang Yuan, this bastard, he actually had this move. Xiaohua was shocked. How could he still care about taking out the fire net? He hurriedly pointed his finger at the Hengchen again. With a puff sound, a shadow struck Xiaohua's back. The yellow talismans that Xiaohua had sent out earlier were all broken. Xiaohua's body swayed as if he had lost his balance. At this time, another shadow attacked Xiaohua's waist from another angle. Humph! He Fang Yuan, who was far away, unconsciously showed a trace of joy on his face. He gritted his teeth and waved the Tai-E azure light staff several times. Numerous phantoms appeared and pounced on Xiaohua one after another. An initial stage Qi refinement brat dares to come to the Feather Immortal Assembly. It is your honor to be treated so seriously by I. He Fang Yuan seemed to have expended a lot of energy to activate the artifact. He took out a pill from his storage bag and ate it. He was about to close his eyes and adjust his breathing when the scene in front of him made him dumbfounded. Xiaohua, who had lost his balance, was about to be hit in the waist by a shadow. But at this crucial moment, Xiaohua's body twisted strangely. He simply didn't use any magic power and easily dodged that shadow. Immediately after, Xiaohua's body became even more graceful, even more carefree. In the air, it was as if he was taking a stroll, dodging the overwhelming rod shadows one by one. In He Fang Yuan's eyes there were no gaps in the rod shadows, but Xiaohua took a step to the left, a step to the right, a step up, a step down, finding countless gaps. Moreover, Xiaohua's footsteps went from unfamiliar to smooth, becoming more and more skillful with each step. Ethereal steps. The name of this footwork appeared in Xiaohua's mind. This ethereal steps seemed to be something that Xiaohua had already recalled in Jingbo City, and gradually recalled it in the battles afterwards. And today, in front of He Fang Yuan's strange rod technique, he had finally completely recovered it. This. He Fang Yuan had never seen such a mystical footwork. Moreover, in his divine sense, there was not a trace of magic power fluctuation on Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua got out of the encirclement of the staff shadows and scanned with his divine sense. He snorted coldly, "Senior brother, after seeing your methods, shouldn't you see I's methods?" Before he finished speaking, Xiaohua suddenly flew over and arrived in front of He Fang Yuan at an extremely fast speed. He also stretched out his hand and took out a pitch-black staff, smashing it towards He Fang Yuan's head. Although Xiaohua was casually swinging the staff, it was different in He Fangyuan's eyes. This staff seemed to have solidified the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth, as if this staff was born to smash He Fangyuan's forehead. A kind of fear arose from the bottom of He Fangyuan's heart. Without thinking, He Fangyuan also waved the artifact in his hand. Dozens of phantoms shot out again, meeting Xiaohua's demonic spear. Come! Xiaohua shouted loudly, the demonic spear in his hand not changing its downward momentum. Puff puff puff, dozens of sounds rang out in succession. That tiny green light staff's phantoms were smashed apart by the demonic spear like bubbles. With a loud bang, the demonic spear struck the tiny green light staff's main body. An incomparably huge force transmitted over. He Fangyuan's hand felt a burst of heat. No matter what, he could no longer hold onto the tiny green light staff. His hand loosened and he was sent flying by Xiaohua. He Fangyuan was horrified. He turned around and hurriedly used his magic power to escape. At the same time, his other hand was not slow either. A ring was held in his hand, and under the activation of his magic power, a three-colored brilliance burst out, about to envelop him. How could Xiaohua allow him to protect himself? Activating the hibernating thunder escape, Xiaohua instantly caught up to He Fangyuan. The demonic spear swung and struck He Fangyuan's back. With a ping sound, the tricolored brilliance that had just appeared was dispersed by Xiaohua, and the demonic spear also struck He Fangyuan's back. It hurts. He Fangyuan screamed loudly. A mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth as his entire body was sent flying by Xiaohua. If it was a battle of magic power and artifacts, He Fangyuan could still contend for victory with Xiaohua. But now that Xiaohua had closed in on him, He Fangyuan could only be casually crushed by Xiaohua. Eat this young master's staff again. Xiaohua sneered. The demonic spear struck out like a staff again, this time aiming at He Fangyuan's forehead. Seeing the pitch-black staff in Xiaohua's hand stirring up the heaven and earth spiritual energy in the air, instantly enlarging in front of He Fangyuan's eyes. He Fangyuan's eyes unconsciously shrunk as a feeling of his liver and guts being torn apart involuntarily emerged. At the same time, at this moment, He Fangyuan felt that death was so close. In just a breath's time, his decades of hard work would turn into water, all of his dreams would turn into bubbles. He Fangyuan felt a sense of powerlessness facing Xiaohua. His heart was dead. But at this moment of life and death, He Fangyuan suddenly had a strange feeling. The surrounding primeval qi abruptly turned sluggish as his heart died, and then began to show signs of condensing. Foundation establishment. He Fangyuan actually showed signs of foundation establishment at the moment of his death. Sigh, unfortunately, it is already too late. He Fangyuan smiled bitterly. Because Xiaohua's demonic spear was already on He Fangyuan's forehead, He Fangyuan could almost feel the merciless coldness of the spear. But right at this moment, Xiaohua stopped. The moment the demonic spear struck He Fangyuan's forehead, Xiaohua's hand stopped firmly like it was cast from iron. Soon after, Xiaohua's gentle words entered He Fangyuan's ears. Senior He, this junior only came to the Feather Immortal Assembly to gain some experience. I have no other plans. Do you believe me now? He Fangyuan had just escaped from death, and this was the crucial moment of foundation establishment. How could he dare to delay for even a moment? He only had time to say many thanks and quickly put a foundation establishment pill into his mouth. Immediately after, a three-colored cloud descended from the sky, wrapping around He Fangyuan and sending him out of the illusion formation. Sigh. Seeing He Fangyuan leave the illusion formation, Xiaohua sighed. Seeing He Fangyuan's lifeless expression and the desire in his eyes, Xiaohua could not help but think of his eldest senior brother Xiangyang. He could not help but feel pity and could not help but put away the demonic spear in his hand. After all, he could not bear to kill a cultivator who had worked hard for decades and was about to reach foundation establishment in his own hands. What a huge loss. Xiaohua shrugged. I don't know if this He Fangyuan will bear a grudge, otherwise, I would have found myself a mortal enemy for no reason. That's right, that guy's magic artifact has not been taken away. Since I picked it up, it naturally belongs to me. That guy probably does not have the face to ask me for it back. Thinking of this, Xiaohua hurriedly released his Buddhist consciousness and searched for the tiny green light rod that was sent flying in the illusion. Outside Xiaohua's Naiwan palace, the Buddha's relic with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the earth was still an illusory outline. The Buddha's light that appeared out of thin air where the heart was did not attract Xiaohua's attention at all. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel, We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.